Hello and welcome to the weekly David 67 Celtic live stream. Hopefully a few people are going to join us. Hopefully the sound's working properly. Hopefully the camera's working properly. It's been a wee bit of a day where the Wi-Fi and the internet has been a wee bit in and out and a bit unreliable. And also a wee bit of a minor emergency just in the last half hour or so with one of our cats getting stuck up a tree. Happily, she's managed to come down from the tree. Otherwise, I was nearly having to postpone the live stream till later on. So, planned today is just to have a wee chat as we are in the international break. The transfer window is ended one way or another. Not really gone as well as we'd hoped. Thank you, Paul Biddle, for joining us today. Transfer window not gone as well as we'd hoped. Obviously, a lot of negativity going around, a lot of accusations and stuff. My idea is, and hey to you as well, Sarah, nice for you to join us. Sarah, one of my long-standing subscriber viewers right at the very start of David 67, which has now been 2 years ago. So nice for you to join us, Sarah. So as I said in the wee introduction explanation regarding the live stream, what I would be hoping for, if we can, is to be nice and positive, looking ahead, hopefully moving things on. I think there are things that we can do as Celtic supporters. I think there are things that are out with our control. I think there's certainly what we do need is transparency. I've seen some contrasting stories regarding what our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Nicholson, is going to do or not do. Certainly, obviously, I think, as of my video from a couple of days ago and some comments and stuff, I think personally that the blame lies with lots and lots of different people. I think blaming the board 100% isn't fair. I think they've made mistakes. I think they control a lot of things. I think we also don't know the full job of what board members actually do. In essence, the Chief Executive Officer, which is Mr. Nicholson, the Chief Financial Officer, they're both on the board. And because they're executive members of the board, they actually are the ones who are supposed to come out in public, justify what they're doing or not doing and how things have gone and explain themselves, not just to shareholders and to other board members and investors and stuff. The job of the Chief Executive Officer and the Chief Financial Officer is to be, in theory, a public face of the club, a public face of the board. And just like a Chief Executive Officer of a health board or a factory, a company, a bank, a supermarket or chain or whatever, they're supposed to be there present. If they're not going to be speaking in public, they're supposed to have a spokesperson who speaks on their behalf. There are complications over business law and privacy laws and confidentiality and financial laws and stuff, which they have to bear to bear in mind. But in essence, Mr. Nicholson and the Chief Financial Officer are supposed to be the public face of the board, the public face of the company. And in the end, like any Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Nicholson is in charge of the company, i.e. Celtic. I know it's not really, it's a public limited company. It's on the stock market. It's got shareholders. It's got investors. It's got lots and lots of fans. So although it is a football club and has been for 140 years is so I have seen contrasting stories in the press today. Some saying that that he's going to be making an actual public statement. Not sure whether that's going to be a press conference, whether that's going to be a televised interview with Celtic TV. Not sure if it's simply going to be a press statement. What we do know is that in a few weeks' time, he and the board do have to release financial statements. That gives a sort of update partway through the financial year as to what the ins and outs, the profits and losses and fees and stuff have been. Quite whether that financial statement will expand to the reasoning why the transfer market didn't go as expected, that things didn't go well at the end. Certainly, I think personally, and this is just my opinion, I am happy for everybody to have their own opinion. I'm happy for everybody to have different ideas about what the best way to resolve the matter is. Some people are talking about boycotting the Europa League matches. Some people are talking about boycotting the cup matches at Celtic Park. I personally think that not supporting the players one way or another at Celtic Park in the cup matches in the Europa League, it's going to mean potentially half empty Celtic Park, which gives obviously the opposition a big advantage theoretically. Celtic Park is one of the most brilliant crowds in the world, a very, very partisan crowd, a crowd that some very big superstar footballers have found very intimidating. Mentioned by the Juventus players a number of years ago, Del Piero and Pavel Nedved. The Barcelona players also talked about the atmosphere at Celtic Park being very intimidating. Several of last year's Champions League opponents found Celtic Park very intimidating to play in front of. So I do think personally that as fans we should be supporting the players on the pitch and creating a supportive environment for the players. But everybody to their own. All I would say is what I would hope Celtic fans could do is be pleasant, respectful to each other. Do notice quite a lot of the comment sections and message boards and stuff, and there's often quite a lot of nastiness from one Celtic fan to another, because that Celtic fan is doing what the other Celtic fan thinks is the right thing to do. I think we've all got our own solutions, we've all got our own ideas, and we're all free to do or not do what we want to do. And I think we should try and be pleasant to each other. And I think we all should try and find positives and move forward. Yeah, okay. What I would personally say is that in terms of financial terms, the club is very, very strong. We're not got the problems that a great number of football clubs have at the moment. We've not required yet more investors to bail us out. We're financially looking after ourselves. Yep. Yes, I would entirely agree. 1888 CFC. I think we do need to stay united. What I have noticed is that there are an awful lot of other sports sites, newspaper type sites, and by Jiminy, they're jumping on Celtic and trying to make every single little thing as negative as possible. Also misinterpreting facts and misinterpreting what players actually are. Couple of stories I was reading over the last day or two were implying that Celtic, that Shin Yamada, for example, a very inexperienced star player, simply just a bench warmer, And yet Shin Yamada had a successful career in the J League, current Japanese international. He got a position in the last Japanese squad that Japanese squad. So Shin Yamada, way more than just a bench warmer, a squad person. He is potentially, I think, a player that could and very likely will score a lot of goals in Scotland once he's had a month or two to settle into the team, the new tactics, the new teammates, the interactions of how people know what runs he'll make, how he can anticipate what the two wide players and the midfielders are going to do. So Dexter saying, do you think it would be best for Brendan Rodgers to walk for the good of the club? I can't see Brendan Rodgers, due to his personality, leaving the club. In some ways, and I think I've said this to a few people in comment sections and replies and stuff, it may have been actually best at the start of the season when reportedly Rodgers, Nicholson, Dermot Desmond and Lawwell had a meeting. Not sure whether I think that meeting was at Brendan Rodgers' home in Spain over several rounds of golf and stuff. But reportedly the Nicholson, Lawwell, Desmond took an offer of a new contract extension, etc. Brendan Rodgers. Now he's saying something different. It varies from week to week and month to month what he's saying. And I think what the best thing to do would have been at that point, if Rodgers wasn't willing to sign a contract extension or at least negotiate over the next month or two, probably, as can often be the case, the manager says that this will be his last year. He's leaving at the end of the year. That typically happens when a manager's going to retire. So like the Wengers and the Fergusons, or Jurgen Klopp's another good example of a manager who said he was going to finish at the end of the season. This would be his last season at Liverpool, for example. So it may have been best, I think, for Brendan Rodgers. I don't think Brendan Rodgers will walk. I think he's far too stubborn a man, far too set in his ways. He's got a degree of pride and a degree of also but sort of self-importance. Also doesn't always, I think, personally respect other managers, other clubs, journalists, TV people, etc. So I think we should try and stay clear of any legal things, because there are restrictions on YouTube regarding these kind of things. But I do accept that legal case hanging over them is a factor, because it could mean a lot of money coming out of the club. I don't think personally. So I think my personal feeling is regarding why the transfer window, etc., didn't go well, is a combination of factors. A good example for me. A good example for me was the Kasper Dolberg non-signing. It would appear from most of the stories I've read that Celtic and Anderlecht agreed a fee, and that was all agreed. But Dolberg didn't want to come to Celtic. He didn't want to go to anybody except Ajax. Now, a lot of the stories were implying Ajax only came in for him right at the end, on the last day. However, other stories are saying that Anderlecht, about a month, 6 weeks ago, raised the possibility of Dolberg coming back to Ajax. And so it had been circulating, and he knew there was interest from Ajax in him via his agent for a month or 6 weeks prior to him being signed on actually signed on the Tuesday, the day after the transfer window ended. So it sounds to me, from all the stories I've read, that Dahlberg was going to come to the club. It was that Celtic and Anderlecht agreed a fee of about £8.5 million. That was all agreed. Then it went to Dahlberg, who said he didn't go to any old club. He wanted to stay at Anderlecht or go to possibly Germany or preferentially to Ajax in Amsterdam, and that's where he's gone to. And apparently, it's been a desire for him to get back to Holland, back to Ajax, for the last couple of years. So, what I'm trying to say with this one is, it sounds like the financial people, the recruitment, the scouting people, and the financial people all got that bit right, except nobody had bothered to ask Dahlberg and his agent, "Do you want to come to Celtic or not?" So in essence, what I'm trying to say is, I think personally, it's a disconnection between all the various different parts of how you get a contract, how you get a transfer, how you get a player to come to the club. Now, several of the deals that they did over the transfer window, particularly at the early on ones, went nice and swiftly. So things where the two Japanese players are a good example. The bid went in. There was negotiations, bid went in, the two players said they wanted to come to Celtic, the bids were all negotiated and agreed, agents got the player contracts done, the two players came over, and it was all done in a week, 10 days, all very smoothly, no backwards and forwards. So it sounded like the people who organised that part of the deal got things done really quickly, really efficiently. And then it sounds like the deeper they got into the transfer window, the more and more disorganized, chaotic things got, which for me is a failing within the recruitment team, the scouting team, the financial team, and also, in essence, in terms of the board, the people who are in charge of that are the Michael Nicholsons and whoever the chief financial officer is. Can't remember what his name is, but those are the ones who are coordinating as executive members of the board those sorts of things, and they're supposed to be in charge of all the people beneath them, and they're supposed to be ultimately the person who carries the can when things go wrong. So if a big bank goes bust, the chief executive officer, if a big company goes bust or gets into financial problems or legal problems, the chief executive officer is the one who gets the blame, and he's the one that carries the can. He either has to fix things or he has to fall on his sword and pass on the job to somebody else. But at Celtic at the moment, and for several years, there's been a complete lack of transparency. So yes, I think for in terms of Dahlberg, his decision was he didn't want to come to Scottish football. He didn't want to go to. He was happy at Anderlecht, even though they were not in any form of European competition. There were several stories saying that Dahlberg was happy to wait until the January transfer window, see what offers, what interest was cropping up in those 5 months between August and January. So he was not intending to leave Anderlecht unless it was for what he thought was the right club, and he didn't think Celtic was the right club. The other interesting stories regarding the David Fofana, the player at Chelsea who chose to go to Charlton, that all then fell apart. Now, I've got just somewhere a little interesting thing. At least I think it's interesting. And certainly at the moment, the Scottish League is not very prestigious, nor has it got a particularly good TV contract. So just thought it would be a wee bit interesting to do a bit of research into. So there is a footballing site that ranks football leagues around the world globally from 1 down to whatever. So not too surprisingly, the English Premier League is globally the number one ranked league in terms of quality of games, quality of players, star players. Obviously, English Premier League's also been successful in Europe. It's got the biggest TV contract in the world. So the English Premier League's TV contract is £1.6 billion a year. That's 600 million more than the next one, which is the Bundesliga. What I thought found very interesting was, in terms of world leagues, the English Championship is the number 7 ranked league in the world, and it's also got the number 7 TV money in the world. So all the English Championship, their money pot is £187 million a year split amongst them. So the Scottish Premier League is ranked 27th in the world for the league quality. Our TV contract is 21st in the world. It's now at 40 million. We were 31st up until 2025 because Sky has added on 5 more million, and Premier Sports has added in 10 million for the Scottish Premiership. And just as an example, Scottish Premier League money contract is still less than the United States Women's Soccer League, which is £46.75 million a year. So clearly, the Scottish League is not a rich league. It's not a league with quality of teams. Celtic are ranked 50th, the 50th best club in the world by these rankings. Rangers are ranked 91st in the world in terms of rankings, and the prestige, the ranking of the league is based on all the clubs in the league. So part of what's drawing Celtic and Rangers down in the world is also the Aberdeens, the Hibs, the Hearts, and the poor quality of players at them, and obviously at Livingston, Falkirk, etc. So it's not too surprising that players don't always want to come to play in Scotland. And I think, unfortunately, with us not being in the Champions League this year, we've also lost the one and only carrot that might have made players want to come to Scotland. And just as an example, up until the start of this season, Scotland's TV money contract was less than India's Football League, less than South Africa's Football League, less than Austria, less than Romania. So it kind of shows where the TV money is. And TV money also implies the quality of the league, the quality of the games and stuff. So clearly, the reason that Sky don't pump a lot of money into Scottish football anymore is because the quality of the football has gone down and down and down. And I think we also can see that in terms of the types of players that teams like St Mirren, Kilmarnock, Livingston and stuff can attract. The manager of St Mirren was talking about the fact that nowadays he's competing with the League of Ireland and the League of Wales and in effect the English 5th division and 4th division for players. So he's now competing with League of Ireland, League of Wales, and the top non-league sides in England, and the 2nd division, which is in effect the 4th division. So it's kind of showing where Scotland has got in the world. Well, yes, I don't know. It's some. I don't know whether it is people from other football clubs are going on Celtic-based videos and stuff. There's also been there's been a few comments on my channel that YouTube has put into sort of quarantine thing because of the nature of the language, the violent language, the swear words, etc. And certainly a couple of those were people who were from their avatars and their name and stuff were clearly Celtic supporters. So there are Celtic supporters out there who are being nasty and horrible to other Celtic supporters, which I don't think is a good thing. I've got no problem disagreeing with somebody, no problem with sharing opinions. Everybody has the right to their opinion. Everyone can, but I think we do need to be pleasant and support each other and support the clubs. Yes, and I think that's a brilliant point, actually. The game between Celtic and Rangers, in essence, the two best, most successful clubs in Scotland, if you accept the debate that Rangers really aren't Rangers, in that they got reinvented 10, 12 years ago, and then got reinvented again, obviously, when they got bought by the Sanford 49ers. The game on Sunday was a terrible advert for Scottish football, so it's not too surprising players don't want to come. Well, see, that's a good. Daniel's making a good point there. See, a lot of people, when they read that comment from Neil Doncaster, which was in essence that the gulf in Scottish football is getting bigger and bigger because Celtic keep on getting the Champions League money because they keep on being the best in Scotland. Now, actually, what I think he was meaning is that all the other teams in Scotland should raise their standards. Some people have said that what he implied was that Celtic should drop their standards to the level of everybody else. When in fact, what he was meaning was that those other clubs should try and attract investment, quality players, improve their academies, to raise their standards. And in essence, one could argue that Aberdeen kind of did that. They have had quite a lot of investment. Hearts, particularly with the chap who I think was linked to Brighton, who's now linked to them as well. So I think what he was implying, Neil Doncaster, was that other teams should raise up to the levels that Celtic have got by investment, player recruitment, academies, developing their own players, etc. But some Celtic fans certainly seem to have interpreted it the other way around, that Neil Doncaster was telling Celtic to drop their standards, when, for me, I raised their standards. So I personally think one of the ways that the Scottish League gets better and better is by all of the clubs really investing in Scottish talent, Scottish schoolboys, teenagers, etc. And also making their academies high quality, so that other countries will their players will choose to come to Scotland to be in the academies at Celtic and Hibs and Hearts and Rangers and Aberdeen and stuff. Much like the way that the English League got better and better was partly because a lot of overseas talented players came to academies. Arsenal were a good example. Liverpool's another team. Man United. A lot of teams have raised their standards by getting the creme de la creme, top teenage players, schoolboys players, and also with those leagues, obviously massive TV contracts really helps as well. But one of the reasons also the Scottish leagues are struggling is because our coefficient as a nation has gone down and down and down, which is why we were forced to qualify for the Champions League this time, because the St Mirrens, the Kilmarnocks, the Aberdeens, etc., were failing to get through the first qualifying rounds, which meant our coefficient went down and down. So even though Celtic had done pretty well and Rangers had done well in the Europa League, so it's difficult to reverse that. So I think it's going to be a slow process to get the Scottish League back up and up and up. For us who are a wee bit older, it's not too long ago that some of the best players in Britain, some of the best players in Europe were playing in the Scottish Premier League, the Scottish Premiership, mostly for our big rivals. who had a lot of the best players in UK and Europe in their side, because they bankrupted themselves to pay the wages. But the Scottish League in the past has attracted very high level Scottish players, very high level Irish players, etc. So I think it can happen again. Yes, so I still think personally Celtic have got the best squad in the country, the best players in the country. A lot of people have been making a big thing about the fact that Rangers had a net spend over the summer break or summer transfer window of £20 million. Celtics would have spent well, it was over 5 million on Balakwisha, over 5 million on Tunetke, a million and a bit on Nigri, and a million and a bit on Yamada. So probably in terms of Celtic spending, etc., it's probably 15 million, 16, 17 million, hard to know. However, the question is also whether the players that other clubs have signed are the quality to overhaul Celtic. I don't think personally the players are of a level that other teams have signed that are better than the players that we've got, assuming that our players play as well as they can. And clearly, at the start of this season, and in particular the two Kirat Almaty games and the Rangers game, they played way below their level. Yes, so the Scottish League certainly nowadays is a stepping stone potentially to a bigger European league, and for many players, it's a stepping stone to get into the English Premier League. And that may well be where we are. And as I said, we are the 27th ranked league for quality and prestige, the 21st ranked league for TV money. So maybe that is Scotland's fate, is that we are going to be a second division, a third division league in terms of global prestige. Celtic's problem and Rangers' problem is that they're both big global clubs in a league that's small, is low prestige, and it's getting smaller and smaller. And certainly Celtic has had a great history for the last 20, 25 years of selling them on for big profits, investing in the same sorts of things. So Virgil van Dijk's a brilliant example. A player bought for a couple of £1 million from Dutch football. We sold them on for 10 million. Southampton sold them on for 70 million. And obviously there are lots and lots of examples of Celtic buying players. Matt O'Reilly, another player that we got for 2 million, we sold them for 25 million. We bought Jota for 6, we sold them for 25 million. Kieran Tierney, we got him for nothing, we sold them for 25 million. So maybe that is Celtic's fate, and Scotland's fate is to develop players, make them better, and then move them on. Motherwell's a very good example. Motherwell has got apparently a very good academy. They've got links to the Scottish Football Association. One of the people who's now involved in Celtic's youth system used to be involved in the Motherwell Academy and the Scottish Academy that was linked to some of the schools in the Motherwell area. And obviously Lennon Miller was a perfect example of a player that came through that system. Motherwell Academy, the special football school academy type thing. and obviously Motherwell just sold him on for a lot of money. So just one wee thought regarding player quality. So a lot of people are making a big thing about the fact on the last day of the transfer window, Rangers signed Chermiti for £8 million. That fee will go up to £10 million. A few days before, obviously, they'd signed Bojan Mijovski for £2.6 million, rising to £4.2 million. I just thought it was interesting. A lot of people are decrying the signing of Kelechi Iheanacho because he'd been unsuccessful in Spanish football and he hasn't scored a lot of goals for quite a long time. Just thought it'd be interesting just to look at Chermiti. So Chermiti, who Rangers signed for £8 million, rising to 10. His career record in first-team football, 46 games, 3 goals, 2 assists. He moved from Portuguese football to Everton. His career at Everton was 24 games, 0 goals, 0 assists. It doesn't really strike me as a player likely to be a world beater or a chap who's going to score lots of goals in Scottish football. 46 games, 3 goals, 2 assists. No goals in 24 games for Everton. Kelechi Iheanacho had a really successful career in English football with Leicester and then Man City, then Leicester. 87 goals in those games. He had 3 goals in 11 games in Sevilla, but no goals in 7 La Liga matches. Quite similar to Mijovski's career season at Girona last year. 23 games, 4 goals, 2 assists, but in the La Liga, 18 games with 2 goals and no assists. So 2 of his goals and 2 of his assists were in cup matches. So Shin Yamada, 37 goals in 131 games. Johnny Kenny, 40 goals in 135. So it does look on the face of it that certainly Mijovski scored goals for Aberdeen. The question is, are Celtic strikers better or the same or worse than the Rangers strikers? I would say Celtics have probably still got the better strikers. I think we've also got more midfielders who can score goals. We've obviously, if you add in Dyson Maida's 33 goals last season, he's clearly, I think probably Maida is going to be with us buying Balikwisha and Taneki in the last few days of the transfer window. I think clearly the plan that Brendan Rodgers and the recruitment team, the scouting team, I guess the plan is that we're going to be using Dyson Maida primarily through the middle, using Yang, Forrest, Balikwisha, Tunieki as our wide players, and Maida probably, I guess, along with Iheanacho are going to be our 2 number 1 strikers, with Kenny and Yamada as the backup strikers. Yes, the Stephen, brilliant point, and it's one I've made quite a lot to a lot of different people, is that that our academy for far too long has not been good enough. We did bring through quite a number of players in the time of Ralston, McGregor, Forrest, all coming through at much the same time. Then a bit of a gap, Kieran Tierney coming through at the start of Rodgers' first phase as Celtic manager. Then since Kieran Tierney came through the academy, no one pretty much has come through to be an actual proper star player from the academy. Stephen Welsh was about the only player that really that graduated from the academy into the first team, but he's never really been a particularly high quality player. Dane Murray might be in the long run a good enough player to be a proper Celtic good player, starting player. I've got a lot of hopes for Colby Donovan. And it may well be with, obviously, Alistair Johnson being out till November, Anthony Ralston out of the Scotland squad with his ankle problem. it could well be that the next couple of games Celtic have when they come back from this international break, the Kilmarnock League match and then the Partick Thistle League Cup match, that Colby Donovan gets to start at right back. And I think if he plays well, he could well be moved up the pecking order to be Alistair Johnston's backup when Johnston does get back from injury, hopefully in November. Although having said that, don't wish to sort of be all pessimistic, because this is a positive, not negative live stream, is that obviously Aaron Hickey has only just got back to fitness after well over a year out with a hamstring injury, but that was very, very unusual. So hopefully Johnson's on the road to recovery. Hopefully he's back in October rather than November. But certainly the academy is something that I think has been really, really struggling. My personal feeling is that the whole Celtic Football Club, the executive board members, the non-executive board members, the non-executive board members are people like Lawwell and Dermot Desmond, the other couple of big majority shareholders. Now, in theory, those people are supposed to be more just advisory and guiding where the club's going to go. And then it's the job of the chief executive officer, Nicholson, and the chief financial officer to put all that into that plan in action. I do think the plan is for Celtic to keep on progressing and get to whatever the best level they can in European football. So I think the number one, I think any football club, the number one target for Celtic should be winning the league, because winning the league gets you into the next Champions League one way or the other. It's going to be probably a couple of qualifying rounds next year, with the way that the coefficient will have been this year, unless Celtic and Rangers do really well in the Europa League. It's probably going to keep on dropping down. If we think back to Brendan Rodgers' first season, we played the Lincoln Imps in about the third or the fourth so the first qualifying round. So we had about 3 or 4 levels to get through before we got anywhere near the Champions League. And of course, Brendan Rodgers lost his first ever game as a Celtic manager to Lincoln Imps 1-0. And they were a team from Gibraltar. So I do think personally that the club is ambitious, the board is ambitious, the executive and non-executive board members are ambitious, because the more successful Celtic is in Scotland, but also in Europe and then globally, the better it is for the club. More money comes into the club, the stock price goes up, the share price goes up, investment goes up, and the club gets bigger and bigger. So in terms of Celtic carrying on developing and growing, I do think the board and the club and everyone within the club is ambitious. I think over the last 2 or 3 years now, whether it's due to Rodgers coming back and there being changes in some of the backroom staff, the recruitment, so the head of the recruitment left, head of scouting left, within a few months of Rodgers coming in, within about 6 months of Rodgers coming in, the people who'd worked really, really well with Ange Postecoglou for a couple of years were chucked out the club. Whether that was other factors, whether it was Brendan Rodgers couldn't work with those people, I don't know. Quite a lot of people I've been reading the stories of are kind of implying that Brendan Rodgers hasn't had a very good success rate at any of the clubs he's managed at the higher levels. So Liverpool, then Celtic, then Leicester, then Celtic again. His transfer successes, his assessment of players, of which ones to keep and develop, which ones to get rid of, hasn't been very good. Quite a lot of people have been sort of talking recently about the fact that we let Tomoki Iwata go, and he's become a big success at Birmingham. That's carried on in the Championship. the South Korean striker, been a big success in Belgian football. So there's a feeling that his ability to keep players, develop the right ones, and get rid of the ones you're not going to develop hasn't been very good at Celtic, and at Liverpool and Leicester, and again here at Celtic. And I think that's certainly a factor. So for me, there seems to be a change. What was working well under Ange Postecoglou in terms of identifying players, getting them in really early in a transfer window. Ange Postecoglou came in when Celtic were a complete mess, took over Celtic very badly disorganised. He seemed to get things organised really well. He got some players in. He developed players like Ralston and Greg Taylor, changed the way they played. He got quite a lot of good use out of players, backup players like Adam Montgomery at that point. He then brought in the Kyogos. He then brought in later on. He brought in the 3 Japanese players in the winter transfer window, except Maeda, Hatate, and Iguchi. They all got recruited and were ready to play for Celtic a week before they got signed. In that all those deals had been pre-negotiated, pre-agreed. The players actually came over to Scotland a week before the start of the year. And same again the following year when we got Alistair Johnston in between Christmas and New Year, and he played within a couple of days in a Rangers Celtic match. Well, the rumours are, fortunately or unfortunately, fortunately for Ange Postecoglou, is he's been lined up potentially to be the new manager of Bayer Leverkusen, who of course sacked their manager within a couple of weeks of the season starting, and also Fenerbahce, who sacked Jose Mourinho because they didn't get into the Champions League either. So he's being apparently lined up for one or both of those jobs. So I think, unfortunately, we're not going to get Ange Postecoglou back, even if he would come back. Yes. Now, the Dexter's making a really good point now. Now, I do think this is actually something that Celtic, again, haven't addressed for a long time, is things like free kicks, things like deliveries, free kicks to score goals, or delivery of corners. He's by far not anything like my favourite player, but if you look at a player like Tavernier of Rangers, his dead ball delivery into the box is really good, be it a corner, a direct free kick. He scores lots of goals, certainly has in the past scored lots of goals from direct free kicks. And it's a long time since Celtic's had a really good person for delivering free kicks. So I think maybe Lee Griffiths was the last one. Some of the older people will remember people like Shunsuke Nakamura. Charlie Mulgrew wasn't too bad. But we've not got anybody recently for the last maybe 5 years or so since Lee Griffiths left us, or Lee Griffiths kind of left us before he actually left us. But we've not really had anybody for a long time who is a threat from corners, direct free kicks, and direct free kicks on the goals. And very much should be something that you practice. Engels, I think, has shown quite a lot of good standard this year, but it's unreliable. So there's been games where his delivery has been brilliant. Unfortunately, when we needed him to be really good delivery in Almaty, his delivery at the corners and free kicks was very poor. Yeah, that's also Dexter's also made a really good point. I think the end of the reserve league in Scotland has been really detrimental, in that players like if you think about so players like who are coming back from injury, or players who are not part of the first team squad. So a player like maybe Marco Tilio, who joined us a couple of years ago, unfortunately got injured playing for Australia before he joined us, but he already was signed. He took a long time to get rehabbed, and he never had any games to play for about four months. He didn't actually make his debut until November. But had there been reserve team football, he would have had lots and lots and lots of games. Also, I think it would be a good bridging gap between the academy and the first team if there was a reserve league for them to play. And I don't think the B team playing in the Lowland League is working. And it's not really that bridging gap, because obviously in a reserve team league, you have a mixture of experienced players, younger players, players who are first team players who are rehabbing from injury, or first team players who've fallen out of favour who are keeping themselves match fit. So I think reserve team football disappearing in Scotland has been a major factor. Yes. Now, Green for Gold makes a brilliant point. And maybe about a year ago, I can't remember exactly when it was, but I did do a short video and a long video looking at Brendan Rodgers' signings for Liverpool, Leicester and Celtic the first time. It was around about the start of when he came back, and the first transfer window under Brendan Rodgers didn't go terribly well. And I think I did a video analysing his career as a manager, supervising transfers. And certainly your point is a brilliant point. His success rate is really rather poor. And I was reading an article today very much highlighting that as well, which maybe is why there has been a reluctance of the board to fully back Brendan Rodgers' decisions. There's confusion also with Rodgers as to whether he does or doesn't greenlight these deals, because he claimed when he first came in June of 23 that he greenlighted the deal for Nevroki and Lagerbielka and Palma and Paulo Bernardo, and then he said he didn't, and then he did, and he didn't. So it's difficult to know quite what Brendan Rodgers' role is in terms of transfers, because certainly all the press conferences done over this transfer window have tended to be, he said, "Oh, it's not. I'm not involved. I don't know. Whether he's just keeping things secret because he's got to keep things secret because of there's negotiations going on, or whether he just genuinely isn't properly involved in the transfer market. I don't know. What one could say is last summer we signed Engels, Trusty, Paulo Bernardo, Idah, I forgot Idah, sorry. And that was about the best part of £30 million for those players, plus Luke McCowan, and at the start of this season, Idah, not everybody's cup of tea. Engels was on the bench, Trusty was on the bench, McCowan's been on the bench. He's never been a starter, although probably was never signed to be a starter as such. Yes, so I've said quite often also, particularly when Brendan Rodgers came back, that I've never been terribly much in favour of anybody going back to a job that they've left before, or going back to a club or a company or a firm or whatever. In general terms, when you go back to a job of any sort, be it football or any sort of job, it doesn't tend to go very well when you go back to it second time around. similar to going back to sort of personal relationships as well, which have broken down before. Quite often it doesn't work when you go back to another time. So certainly Celtic were in a bit of a problem with Ange Postecoglou leaving. Even though I think a lot of thought Ange Postecoglou was leaving, it didn't feel as if Celtic had really properly started looking for a new manager. And Brendan Rodgers was available. He obviously does have links to Nicholson and Lowell and Dermot Desmond. I think he does actually have sort of friendship with Dermot Desmond. So I think that all worked out fine. And I think it was a what one could maybe call a marriage of convenience. But I'm not a great believer in people going back to a club second time around. I have some misgivings about Kieran Tierney coming back, Jota coming back. Hopefully both of them turn into good, successful signings. Most of the time when players come back to a club, it doesn't go quite so well the second time around. Charlie Nicholas was another example of a player who left us, came back to us, and it wasn't really that good when he came back to us. I think that the difficulty with getting a true say in the running of Celtic's affairs, in essence, what that person would need to do, or that organisation would need to do, is have such a large financial input to the club that they would get an equal footing on the board with all the others. So if you are a very big shareholder, you would then get a non-executive place on the board. I don't think with the amount of money it would take to buy out the shares enough for somebody to get that role, or an organisation with someone as their figurehead to get that role. I don't think that as well intentioned as all these groups are, I don't think the influence and stuff can be there. I think certainly that the Celtic board, the Celtic club, all these people should actually be working far more with the fans than they do, and listening to the fans' voices. One thing that did frustrate me quite a lot was I do remember filling in one of these online fan survey type of things. And the idea was that what the fans wanted and what the fans suggested, the board and the club would then take forward. I can't remember exactly when that was, but it certainly feels like it was a long time ago, and it doesn't feel as if anything has really happened secondary to that fan survey. And so it feels to me like there's a degree of lip service of we're going to listen to the fans, we're going to see what the fans want, we'll act on these recommendations, we'll create a sort of top 3, 4 things, and these are things that we'll move forward if we can. Certainly, I have heard rumblings that Celtic are looking to expand the stadium, make it bigger. There is reportedly a very long waiting list for season tickets at Celtic. Don't know if that's exactly true or not, but I've heard that. In general terms, the waiting list for all these packages for European tickets and cup tickets and stuff often can be really long as well. So clearly Celtic has a global interest, a global fan base, and I'm told there are people queuing up for season tickets, queuing up for European packages, etc. So, but certainly, the theory would be that Celtic. One of the thoughts is they will be using the stadium, improving fan comfort, improving things like the IT at the club isn't so on as well. One theory also I've seen mentioned and it probably is practical, would be creating another small stadium or football pitch area near to Celtic Park, a wee bit similar to Hampden with the lesser Hampden ground, where you've got two stadiums in effect next door to each other, with the lesser Hampden or the lesser Celtic Park one being a place where the women's team, the academy, the B team play, where opposition are given that pitch to practice on, etc. And certainly in other sports, rugby being an example, at Murrayfield, they've got the national stadium at Murrayfield, and you've also got a couple of other pitches which are used for club matches, Edinburgh matches, lesser international matches, women's internationals that are used there as well. So I think that actually personally would be quite a good idea to expand the Celtic Park venue so that you've got another stadium for all the other clubs, rather than the women's club and the academy, etc., going and playing in Hamilton and going and playing at Lesser Hampden and going playing here, there, and everywhere. I think it just brings the club all together. And of course, just recently, the club committed a lot of money to the renovating the Barrowfield venue, primarily for physiotherapy, medical, sports science, but also the women's team and the academy teams as well. And I think that's a good example as well of Celtic trying to make itself a bigger and better club, and more of a more modern club. Yes, that certainly was one of the things that I've read in a few different places, was that they were looking at improving viewing angles and improving the seating and the comfort, and not having big pillars in the view of people, or people at the back of the stadium being too far away to have a proper view of the far end of the ground. So they were looking at all these sorts of things, of making Celtic Park a bigger stadium. I would guess making different parts of the stadium bigger and bigger, year by year over a few years, so that in 5 years, 10 years, it's an extra 15,000 capacity, but also all the viewing and comfort and stuff is all far better. So these are supposedly things that fans want, and these reportedly were things that they were going to take forward. Yes, I would have to agree, unfortunately, that things are a mess. I think things are a mess. Things have been a mess before, and Celtic's kept on being a big success. Celtic obviously were a massive mess in the 80s and 90s, coincided with a time where Celtic didn't win terribly much. We dropped down to second, third, fourth in the league, not winning cups, not winning the league for ages and ages. We nearly went out of business in 1994. We got bailed out, and since 1994, the club has been kind of reborn and stuff. And I think in some ways the club is a mess, and I think it's the backroom staff are not interacting and working as a whole global team. There's a lack of cohesion. There's a lack of everyone working towards the same goal, and in essence, it probably means that people at one level or another should be hired and fired and moved on. Quite why Celtic got rid of their head of recruitment and their head of scouting about 6 months into Brendan Rodgers' time, I'm not terribly sure, but certainly since Rodgers came in second time, things certainly seemed for me to have gone downhill in terms of all these background things. Just one other wee thing that I wanted to just look at or get your own thoughts on was was our Europa League squad, what people thought regarding the players that Rodgers and the coaching staff have chosen. To me, it makes a lot of sense. I don't think Rodgers had terribly much scope in terms of any other players that he could have added or not added. I was, to be honest, quite surprised that Shin Yamada wasn't part of the squad. In that he is a current Japanese international. He did score goals, not this season, but the season before, particularly in Japanese football. He was very much one of the best players in Japan in the 24 season. He's now in the Japanese international squad. It does surprise me he's not in the Europa League squad. The question would be, if we don't have if we put Shin Yamada back into the squad, it probably means someone like Yang drops out the squad. So in some ways, it might actually have been better had Yang ended up getting transferred to Birmingham, rather than that all falling through at the last minute, for him to be in essence replaced by Paddy Roberts coming from Sunderland to be the extra winger at Birmingham. Because in essence, we do have 4 players in those sort of forwards who are wingers. We've got Yang, Balikwisha, Forrest, and Tuneki. We've also got Dyson Maida, who really is played much more as a winger at Celtic than anything else. Benjamin Nygren played much more previously in Swedish football and in Danish football as a winger or a centre forward. He hardly ever played as a central midfielder in all his career. It seems to be Brendan Rodgers who's convinced that he is a central midfielder rather than a attacking midfielder or a wide player or even a striker. He scored actually quite a lot of goals in Danish football as a striker. He got played by Sweden as a striker more than when he made his international debut. So I wasn't too surprised that Hayato Inamura didn't get picked. Obviously, Rodgers doesn't like him at all. I think he's actually a player who's going to get better and better if he gets half a chance. Jemai Simpson-Pusey, it makes me wonder what was the point of actually signing him for Celtic if he's not played for Celtic in any way since he came in. He's not properly fit yet. I'm not quite sure how a young man can't be properly fit, because he was in pre-season training with Man City before he came to us. Quite how he's not got himself match fit by now. He's not been anywhere near the team since he came. So wasn't too surprised actually that he didn't get picked. But then I'm not quite sure why he came here. Someone was saying I can't. Yes, it's the question. Stephen makes a brilliant point. It probably is actually better. Simpson-Pusey probably is better going back to Man City. Probably there are obviously rules regarding being at too many clubs on loan in 1 year, but I personally can't see Man City being happy if Simpson-Pusey's not going to be playing for Celtic on a regular or semi-regular basis. You would guess that some form of European experience was part of the reason that Simpson-Pusey was loaned to us by Man City. Yep. So I think agree fully with and someone was saying, I think I've lost that comment about what was the point of signing Callum Osmond. Yeah, so Daniel was asking what was the point in signing. I think the signing of Callum Osmond for me would have made a lot of sense if the idea was that we would bring Callum Osman in, give him a couple of months of pre-season, getting used to the club, the coaches, the fellow teammates, and then sending him off on loan to St Mirren or Kilmarnock or Livingston for a season, so that we can keep a close eye on him, we can see him developing, we can see how he fits in with Scotland. And I think that actually would have moved his career on. It worked to a good extent with Johnny Kenny, sending him off to Irish football for a couple of years. He certainly came back a more experienced player. He came back, obviously, in January of this year. He got involved in the first team squad. He made his debut, he scored his first goal. And his career has moved on in that he now is in the Europa League squad ahead of Yamada, ahead of Osmond. And I think he just got called up to the Republic of Ireland squad just recently as well. So clearly Johnny Kenny has really thrived in having his couple of loan seasons in Irish football, then coming back to Celtic. So I think that was the idea with Callum Osman, was bring him into the club, get him used to everybody, people get used to him. He learns the Celtic ways. We send him out on a loan for a year. He comes back and he's a much better player. Obviously, that happened with Ryan Christie coming to us, then going to Aberdeen. Happened with Liam Scales coming to us from Irish football, then going to Aberdeen. Years and years ago, Cal McGregor was moving from academy football into first team football. He had a year at Notts County. That made him a much better player. So I think that was the idea with Callum Osmond, was bring him in, develop him, get him used to the club, sign him out for a year, bring him back. He'll be more mature, have first team experience, and then we can turn him into a future Celtic number 1, number 2 striker. So I was very, very surprised when he didn't get loaned out to somebody in the end of the transfer window. It was a bit surprising we also didn't loan out Hayato Inamura. Yes, the Celtic haven't actually been performing nearly as well since the Bayern Munich match might well have been a time where Celtic started to be less consistent. Part of that also, I think, coincided with Nicholas Kuhn being desperate to get away from the club in the January transfer window. I think he was quite frustrated because there were several clubs that he would be happy to have gone to who came in for him, but Celtic turned all the bids down at that point. His form, I thought, dipped quite a lot in the second half of the season. He clearly was a superstar for us in the first half of the season. He scored the goal across in Munich, and it felt like coinciding with the winter transfer window shutting, and then him being frustrated he couldn't leave the club, and then got knocked out of the Champions League. Things certainly went down from there. We had quite a number of not very good performances. The terrible performance against St Johnstone, the really disappointing couple of Rangers matches that we had over that time. Obviously, the cup final was another game. And it certainly seems, for one reason or another, we've been quite inconsistent. And particularly the start of this season, particularly the 2 Kierat games and the Rangers game, I've never seen Celtic playing so slowly ever in my life. It was, I really don't understand quite why Celtic are playing so slowly. The stats in terms of Celtic's forward passes as opposed to backward passes and sideways passes, it's quite incredible how many backwards and sideways passes there are. Rodgers says it's the players' fault. I can't see the players playing the way they're playing unless that's what Rodgers has told them to do. And certainly Liam Scales did say that during the Rangers match and the Kierat Almaty match, the second leg, the feedback that Rodgers gave them at the halftime breaks and stuff was just be patient, keep the ball, keep probing, your chances will come. The chances will come. And to be fair, in the Kieran Tierney match, in the end, we did get that chance for Idah, and the Idah that we had at the end of last season would have scored that goal in the first leg against Kieran Tierney, would have scored that goal in the second leg against Kieran Tierney, but he missed those two chances. So I'm not quite sure why Celtic are playing so slowly. They don't seem to have much cohesion. Is it the players? Is it the managers? Is it the coaches? There's always this theory regarding managers when they get into a certain number of years at a club that the dressing room starts to get a bit. They've heard these stories, these motivational speeches, these things before. So as a manager, a coach, or whatever you're supposed to be, keep on keeping your message fresh and changing what you say. Otherwise, players get a bit bored of listening to the same stories and the same tactics and the same motivation type things. And certainly, I think I was saying in a previous live stream that Brendan Rodgers' success rate once he gets into year 3, but particularly year 4 at a club, he's only been at he was at Liverpool into a 4th season, Leicester into a 4th season, and both those times he got sacked. He got sacked by Liverpool in his 4th season, sacked by Leicester in his 4th season. So clearly, with Rodgers, there is a difficulty with him moving on in terms of developing a squad and keeping it fresh and keeping it moving on. And certainly that seems to be the case this season. We certainly seem to be going backwards, not forwards, on the pitch and off the pitch. And we are incredibly slow. Yeah. So for me, it has to be down to the manager. It has to be down to the coaches. And this is the way that Rodgers is wanting them to play. Yes, I would. I would love to have. I would love to have Ange Postecoglou back. He's been one of my favourite Celtic managers of all time. Mostly because watching Celtic with Ange Postecoglou as the head coach was great fun. Celtic played. Oh, thank you for that, Ronnie McNearney. Don't think I've ever had one of those before. Yes, so Ange Postecoglou, tremendous fun. Celtic were non-stop attacking. The goal that Celtic scored with Jota against Rangers, the one where quick free kick, O'Reilly hit them, was brilliant pass through the Rangers defence. Jota goes in, tight angle, chips the ball over the Rangers goalkeeper. It's one of my most favourite goals of all time. And it was a perfect example of the Ange Postecoglou way. Take a quick free kick. The other team can't get themselves organised and sorted. You pass the ball quickly, and you score goals. And that certainly isn't the case at the moment. We're not playing the ball quickly at all. Our restarts are slow. We dawdle when it's a free kick. We dawdle when it's a throw-in. The number of throw-ins, particularly against Rangers, where Kieran Tierney, Ralston, whomever, were just standing there, failing to do a throw, but nobody making runs, nobody getting into space. It was just, it's so disappointing. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So certainly Celtic in I thought Celtic in Rodgers' first spell played quite good attacking football. That kind of got lesser in the Neil Lennon second spell. Certainly, Ange Postecoglou's speed, great football. Everything was fast. We scored lots of goals right from the first whistle to the last whistle. We won a lot of games in the last few minutes in an added time. That seems to be something Celtic are not doing quite so well anymore. And it was great fun being a Celtic supporter with Ange Postecoglou's way of playing football. Yes, couldn't agree more. Kaiser, HTTC. Celtic are incredibly one-dimensional. Incredibly one-dimensional. There's one way of playing. And I've said this in the sort of feedback of the Kieran Almaty games. I couldn't believe the substitutions that Rodgers did, the tactical changes that Rodgers did were non-existent. Kieran Almaty clearly from the first whistle of the second leg, their intention was defend. And I think Kieran Almaty were happy from the first whistle of the second leg to see whether they could get it to extra time and to penalties. And they got it to extra time and the penalties. But what they thought was, we'll just let Celtic batter against our deep four-man defence, our bank of three midfielders. They're not going to break us down. They didn't break us down apart from that one chance for Daz and Idah in the first leg. Celtic didn't really get many chances at all in the 90 minutes, certainly, until the Idah chance in the 85th minute. We got a few more chances in extra time, certainly. But there was no changes. So Kieran Almaty weren't really attacking. So quite why we had four defenders on the pitch, why we didn't move Tierney and Ralston further forward, kept Carter Vickers and Scales at the back to mark their one attacker. I don't know quite why we didn't go two up front. There was the option of having two strikers. Idah as a target man striker and Idah playing off that. You could have put on Yamada, same scenario, playing off. We could have had a bank of three midfielders. We could have played a 3-5-2. We could have done lots of things, but we just stuck in the same boring 4-3-3. And Kirat said, that's fine. That's what you did. That's what we saw you doing on all the tapes and all the video and all the TV footage we've got of you. That's what you always do. That's how we've set ourselves up. That's how we're going to defend you in the first leg. And there was no changes to anything in the second leg. It was just the same one way of playing football. Yes, so Kieran Almaty very much did park the bus. And that's a Clashman Numpty brilliant point as well. It does astonish me the amount of time you see Callum McGregor receiving the ball from the defenders, Carter Vickers, Scales, Ralston, Tierney, whatever, and he's facing Kasper Schmeichel. He's not facing the other way. And quite often, if he does release the ball to another midfielder, to Rio Atati's also facing the wrong way as well. Nobody's taking the ball going forwards. It's so much of Celtic's plays going through Callum McGregor, and we're going backwards or sideways. We're not going forwards. And McGregor very often is facing the wrong way. When the ball goes to Hatati, he often, if he's dropped deep, he's also facing the wrong way. Certainly with Negrin, with McCowan generally, and with Engels, they generally are more facing forward. But McGregor and Hatati are facing far too much, I think, backwards and not forwards. Oh, no. Right. Well, certainly, it's one way of playing football, and it's not working. It works if Celtic do get the ball out quickly from side to side. It will work well if you can switch the ball quickly from the right wing to the left wing, or from the right wing to the centre backs to get it forward. But we're not breaking down teams. We're not showing positive intent. There's been a lot of odd decisions on and off the pitch. And also, I think things at the moment, I think someone was saying quite a long time ago, things are at the moment at Celtic are rather stale. I think the hope was that bringing in these new players, bringing in new players was going to freshen up the club. It'll be interesting to see kind of what the personalities of players like Sebastian Chinyecki, Mikel Onge-Balaquisha, we've now got Kelechi Iheanacho, quite what their personalities are, whether they're the kind of personalities to move Celtic forward, give them a fresh impetus. Sebastian Chinyecki, his stats aren't terribly good from his time in Norwegian and in Swedish football, but his video highlights are very, very impressive. And he does look like a player with lots of tricks, lots of skill, lots of attacking intent. Balaquisha used to be like that. He's kind of not so good since he got himself injured a couple of years ago. Kelechi Iheanacho, from what Rodgers talks about him and what Kasper Schmeichel talks about him, it does sound like Kelechi Iheanacho is a very attacking footballer, an inspirational footballer, a great person to be in the squad and stuff. So hopefully that gives Celtic a fresh impetus and moves Celtic forwards. As things stand with the way that Rodgers manages the team, everything is centred on Callum McGregor as the captain, and Callum McGregor, kind of like if anybody is an American football fan like I am also, of American gridiron football, they kind of have Callum McGregor as a quarterback, so everything starts from Callum McGregor, and he's the one that does all the passes, he's the one that gets the team moving forward. And if Callum McGregor's not getting the team moving forward, nobody else is getting the team moving forward, because McGregor is the pivot. He is the centre of attention. And it's a good point, and it's something I don't think Celtic have looked at in any transfer window, is having someone to be Callum McGregor. Now, I thought when Ange Postecoglou was the manager, we did have Tomoki Iwata, and he seemed to be the player that Ange Postecoglou was developing to be the person who gave Callum McGregor a rest. That doesn't seem to have been the case. Under Rodgers, McGregor plays absolutely every game if he's fit. Even he plays the games against Wraith Rovers and Bucky Thistle and Falkirk and stuff. He seems to play absolutely every game, and everything goes through him. And that's another really good point, is that we could have Kenny Dalglish and Jimmy McGrory and Henrik Larsson as our front three. But if no one's giving them the ball in a scoring position, if no one's creating anything for them to latch onto, no one's putting in good passes or crosses, there's nothing much that Idah or Yamada or Kenny or Maeda or anybody can do unless you're actually giving them proper chances to score. Yes, so Miovski is a person who's kind of divided opinion. When I've done videos about Bojan Miovski being a possible Celtic target last summer and the winter windows, quite a lot of people were saying they wouldn't want Miovski to come to the club, that he's a player who can only score in lower league football, i.e. Scottish football and Eastern European football. That's kind of borne out by the fact that he went across to Girona and scored 4 goals in 23 games, 2 goals in 18 games in La Liga. So it does kind of show maybe that that he is sort of limited in terms of his scored. Certainly, he scored 40 odd goals at Aberdeen. So certainly scored at Scottish level. I think Celtic do need strikers who can score at Scotland level. Certainly, Idah can score at Scotland level. I think Kelechi Iheanacho is going to be able to score in the Scottish leagues. I think Johnny Kenny, if he keeps on progressing as he's starting to show now, I think he can score goals in Scottish level. I think Shin Yamada, if he gets a goal in the side, he'll score at Scottish level as well. If we're talking about Bojan Miovski, there were some stories when Celtic were looking at him in the summer of 2024. So last summer, not this summer, there were some stories saying that Bojan Miovski wasn't going to want to come to Celtic. I'm not quite sure why that was, but there were several different supposed experts and inside sources who were saying that Miovski had turned down the opportunity to come to Celtic. So people had sort of made first inquiries about him coming to the club, and Miovski had turned it down altogether. Certainly, Miovski's at summer of 2024 had said also that his ambition was to play in England or to play in one of the big European leagues. No one from England came in for him, but certainly Girona in Spain did come in for him and didn't work out well for him across there. Yes, so I'm in two minds regarding. I think Adam Idah at Celtic actually did pretty fine. Just thought it was another wee interesting thing, and also does it maybe also come back to what we were talking about in terms of the way that Brendan Rodgers plays football compared to how Ange Postecoglou played football? I thought it was quite interesting just to look at Kyogo's career as a Celtic striker. His first season with Celtic, he scored 20 goals for Celtic in his first season, which was injury affected, but he scored 20 goals and scored 1 goal every 108 minutes. Next season, Angie's second season, 34 goals and scoring 1 goal every 94 minutes. So in essence, 1 goal every game of game time. Under Brendan Rodgers, 23-24, 19 goals in 3,340 minutes. So in the second Ange Postecoglou season, 3,200 minutes, 34 goals. Under Rodgers, 19 goals in even more minutes. And in essence, in his first season under Rodgers, Kyogo was scoring a goal every, in effect, 2 games. And then it was the same last season. Again, a pretty poor return of goals per minute. Adam Idah, in his career at Celtic, the loan season and the full season, 29 goals, scoring those goals at 1 goal every 117.9 minutes, which is comparable to one of the best strikers in Europe, Harry Kane, who for Bayern is scoring a goal every 90 minutes, or a goal a game in effect, and his time at Spurs, 1 goal every 124.4 minutes. So in essence, under Ange Postecoglou, Kyogo was scoring lots of goals and scoring goals at practically a goal a game of game time. Under Rodgers, it dropped to basically a goal every 2 games of game time. And Adam Idah clearly was right up there with the best in terms of his minutes per goal. In his loan season, he scored 9 goals, in effect as 1 goal every 90 minutes of playing time. So it'll be interesting to see how Idah does down at Swansea. His career at Norwich in a comparable level of football, admittedly with a season or 2 in the Premier League down in England, his output wasn't that great for Norwich. But he's had experience at a higher level playing for Celtic. He's had experience in the Champions League. He did score a couple of goals for us in the Champions League against Aston Villa. Most of last season, he was second choice behind Kyogo, then second choice behind Diaz and Idah. So for him to score the number of goals he did last year, I think was actually quite impressive. And I was surprised. That would suggest that he's maybe fallen out with Brendan Rodgers, or Brendan Rodgers has fallen out with him. Certainly something seems to have happened with Adam Idah over the summer holidays. Okay. Certainly the Adam Idah that came back from his summer holidays, back to Celtic for pre-season training and stuff, wasn't somebody who looked like he was going to score many goals for us. He had plenty of chances in the first game against St Mirren. He missed about 4 very good chances to score in that game. It seemed to knock his confidence. And I think Adam Idah was very much a player who relies on confidence. I think he was full of confidence. I think Rodgers filled him full of confidence, and the team filled him full of confidence. When he came to Celtic on loan, I think he also had something to prove when he came to Celtic on loan, because he had a bit of a disappointing time at Norwich. He'd kind of dropped down the pecking order at Norwich in terms of striker. Norwich at the same time obviously had signed Pierre van Hooydonk's son on loan, another player rumoured to be coming to Celtic, but he went to Norwich, and then we got Adam Idah because Norwich didn't need Sidney van Hooijdonk. Didn't need Adam Idah because they had Sidney van Hooijdonk. So I think Adam Idah that we had in the loan season, and at many spells when he was confident in the last season, as a player who would score goals for Celtic, but the Idah that came back off his summer holidays seemed to be slow, lethargic, a step or 2 behind. That certainly was another thing I was thinking that we could talk about this evening as well, is that I think it's absolutely inevitable that Brendan Rodgers is leaving at the end of the season. I think I said on the marathon 4-hour live stream that we did on the transfer deadline day, up till 2 o'clock in the morning, that I think is inevitable that Rodgers is going. I think that the first time there's a job in the English Premier League, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Rodgers took the job. The question is whether who would take the job, who Celtic would be able to attract. There are a variety of Scandinavian managers who've yes, that's Typhoon McFlustery's comment is bang on, that if you're a chief executive officer of any other organization and you fail to get a contract for your company, for your bank, if you fail to get an investment into your bank or your company or your factory or whatever it might be, you fail to secure, as the person whose job it is to secure deals and sponsorship, and you fail to get a £40 million cash injection into the club or the company or whatever, you would be facing losing your job. I don't think that's what's going to happen to Mr. Nicholson. There isn't transparency, and there doesn't seem to be accountability, and that's a real problem. And Typhoon McFluster's point is bang on, which is why I think it would be in Mr. Nicholson's best interests, the club's best interests, and the board's best interests for him, the chief financial officer, maybe Lowell or whomever, to face the music, a press conference, an interview session, whatever. And to explain what went wrong and what they're doing to make things better. Certainly towards the end of the transfer window, Brendan Rodgers was kind of alluding to the fact that all the various different parts of the transfer process at Celtic weren't all joined up. They all weren't working together, that things weren't going in a sort of well-oiled, coordinated way. So maybe he was sort of indicating that underlying what was on the surface, there were a lot of issues and problems and conflicts going on underneath. Yes, certainly it kind of is. We kind of hit our peak with the 1-1 draw in Munich, and since then we've had plenty of good performances, but an awful lot of bad performances up until the Bayern Munich match. Probably the only really bad performance we'd had was the Borussia Dortmund thumping. To an extent, the League Cup final, which was 3-3, but at least in that League Cup final, we found a way to score and we found a way to win through in extra time and penalties. Certainly, Kieran McKenna certainly is an up-and-coming manager. He did extremely well to get Ipswich promoted from the English Championship into the Premier League, as can happen to a lot of managers and clubs moving up from that league to the Premier League, is they quite often drop back down to the Championship again. Some of them, like Bournemouth, come back even stronger the second time around. Bournemouth have turned them, and Brentford have both turned themselves into teams that very comfortably stay in the English Premier League. So Kieran McKenna is actually quite an interesting one. He's at Ipswich, so you do wonder whether if Ipswich didn't get promoted to the English Premier League at the end of this season, he might well be somebody that Celtic would look at. And I think he certainly might look at coming to Celtic. I think he would potentially see as moving forward. I would be surprised personally, Dexter, if Damien Duff came to Celtic. One person that I had thought that might be a person who could come to Celtic, a person who has been a Celtic player in the past, was Robbie Keane. Robbie Keane obviously played for us for half a season on loan. He scored an absolute ton of goals in that time. He's played for a lot of big teams in England. He's had a couple of very successful jobs so far, to the best of my recollection, in, I think it was Israeli football. I think he's now in, I'm not sure where he is. Is he in Hungary or Turkey? But he's moved on and he's been a success in another sort of medium-sized league, medium-sized team. He's obviously got links to Celtic. He's got, he's apparently a big Celtic fan from all I know. He is a person who's media friendly as well, quite an attacking coach and quite an attacking player. So Robbie Keane is somebody I would wonder about as being a potential Celtic manager. I'm not sure if I can pop that comment up, Pork Chop Express. As I said, that there are certain rules and regulations for videos to be monetized and for channels to be monetized and stuff. Not that I'm doing this for the money, and with the size of the channel, I get a wee bit of money now and again every 3 or 4 months, but I do want to have the channel still being allowed to function and still being able to have monetization and stuff. So and so I do have to keep things family friendly, and there are certain things that YouTube don't like as part of videos if it's on a monetized chat. Yes. So I don't see John Kennedy taking over as a permanent manager. I can think he would be pretty obviously. It'd probably be him and Gavin Strachan who would be the caretaker managers if Rodgers did up ship and went down to manage in England. Well, that's an interesting one. That's an interesting one as well. Henrik Larsson has had managerial experience. I think he would be a manager who would attract really good quality players to come to the club. I think he would be someone that the Celtic fans would welcome back in a heartbeat. The other person I've thought who, again, would be a similar position would be Scott Brown. Whether Scott Brown's had it done enough as manager of Ayr to become manager of Celtic, I don't know. It's obviously a massive step up in quality, pressure, etc. Scott Brown, again, a tremendously inspirational person. One of Celtic's all-time most appearances for Celtic. He's in the top 10 of appearances for Celtic. Massive achievements in terms of playing in Europe for Celtic, leading the club, very successful captain of the club. Quite whether he would be able to come back to Celtic and be a manager straight away, maybe. Scott Brown as an assistant and a more experienced one like Robbie Keane, Henrik Larsson as manager. I would tend to agree it's probably too early for Scott Brown to become manager. He was offered the St Johnstone job last season, but turned it down. That might have been actually quite a good stepping stone for him, managing in the Scottish Premiership for a few months. Yes. I think if John Kennedy was appointed as the permanent manager, I think it would be very, very unpopular. I've got no problem with John Kennedy. I think he's actually a pretty good coach. He clearly was very good at putting what Ange Postecoglou wanted into place. Certainly in the Ange Postecoglou days, it appeared that Postecoglou told the coaches and the players what to do, and then the coaches then delivered the training, and Postecoglou just simply watched things and observed and stuff. So I think John Kennedy probably is a good coach, and he's probably a good person for passing on what the manager wants and interpreting things. I don't think he is, as he proved in his caretaker manager spell after Neil Lennon got sacked. I don't think he's a long-term manager for Celtic. I can certainly see him managing Celtic for a few weeks whilst we recruit somebody. That's assuming that Brendan Rodgers leaves. What I think would be really, really helpful for Celtic as the club and the players and the squad is if there is some certainty as to whether Rodgers is leaving at the end of May 2026, or whether he has any intentions of carrying on. I think that may also have had a factor in terms of player recruitment over the summer, in terms of fans not being terribly sure. Fans for the but players not being terribly sure who the manager was going to be in the long term. I wouldn't personally fancy switching from one company to another company if the the leaders of the new company, the bosses at the new company were moving on or weren't committed to the company or committed to the new organisation I'm working for. So I do wonder whether that may have been a factor also in getting players to come to Celtic, was the uncertainty about the long-term manager of Celtic. Yep, Darren O'Day did okay in terms of managing the academy and the B team along with McManus. He's now gone down to Swansea. Be interesting to see how he does down there. Again, I'm not massively sure that he would come back, and I'm not very sure that he would be terribly popular. Terribly popular manager. Again, I think Gavin Strachan is a coach rather than the manager. He reportedly was the coach that Rodgers earmarked to be the one who was going to train Celtic to be better at delivering corners, direct free kicks, and balls into the box from dead ball situations. Yeah. Yes. So it is an extremely good point that Clashman Numpty makes, and he makes lots and lots of. I'm assuming Clashman Numpty is a man, which maybe I should or I shouldn't do, but makes some excellent points. Is that is very much what I think Celtic at the moment are really lacking, is a spokesperson and a transparency and an accountability. Lots of other big organizations have a spokesperson who speaks on behalf of the bosses, or the bosses actually are the ones who are in front of the press, they're on the TV, they're speaking to the workforce or whatever it might be. They actually are much more visible. And Michael Nicholson, whose job it is really as the chief executive to be to be visible and to be the face of Celtic in many ways. Personally, I don't see Simon Murray becoming Celtic manager. Yes. It's one of the problems of being a leader, though, is you are supposed to be the leader. You are supposed to be. So his job as chief executive officer is he is supposed to be the one who's actually the face of Celtic in a lot of ways. The one who is in overall charge of a lot of the other sections of the club. He is supposed to be kind of the manager of the manager of the backroom staff of the club. American sport tends to have a head coach or a manager who manages the team, and they have a general manager who manages all the other aspects. They manage the contracts, they manage the human resources, the personnel, the sponsorship, the recruitment, and all these kind of things. They oversee the draft system in American sport, and the general manager is the one who answers for all those things, and it's their job to give the coach the best possible players, sort out the contracts, get young players in, bring in older players through trading and stuff of players from one team to the other, and also the draft system as well. Yep. So the Giorgi Cadetti situation was a very frustrating one. At the same time as Rangers managed to get in an American into the club in 5 minutes flat, Celtic took months, about 6 weeks, I think it was, took absolutely forever to get Giorgi Cadetti, who was a Portuguese player. He'd bought out his contract with his previous team. There should have been absolutely nothing stopping Giorgi Cadetti coming to the club, and yet it took 6 weeks, 8 weeks to get him him transferred to the club, which is completely ridiculous. And subsequent internal investigations a year or two later proved that Jim Farry and other people within the Scottish Football Association at that time had deliberately blocked the Cadetti transfer, had broken all the rules, had put obstacles up that should never have been there. So I give lots of people credit. I give all the people who went out all the way to Almaty, all that massive flight and connecting flights and stuff. All the people who went out to Almaty to support the club, incredible supporters, incredible commitment to the club, and they deserve something from the club, some kind of medal from the club, some kind of recognition from the club, which is never going to happen. And then anybody who hangs about outside Celtic Park, etc., waiting for a player to come in, and over the whole course of the last day of the transfer window, we had one player come in, and I think Sebastian Chinecki came into the club at 11:30 at night. It was nearly midnight before he actually was announced in front of Celtic Park. So we had Adam Idah going out, Stephen Welsh going out, and Yang going out, and then coming back on the same day. Yes, so different version of the three amigos with Lowell, Desmond, and Nicholson. The three amigos we had before scored a lot more goals and a lot more great performances than these three amigos. Although theoretically, in terms of the board, where their role on the board, Dermot Desmond and Peter Lawwell are non-executive, and so they're more advisory, they're more guidance. It's Mr. Nicholson and the Chief Financial Officer on the board who actually are the ones who are supposed to be actually doing something. Yes. So lots and lots of big credit for all the fans who went out to Kazakhstan. Lots of credit for all the fans who turn up week in, week out, travel to support the club, pay their money at the turnstile and pay the money through the season tickets and the ticket lotteries, etc. So massive support for them. And I think, again, there should be a lot more recognition, I think personally, from the club, of fans that turn up week in, week out, fans that travel hundreds and thousands of miles to support the club on all corners of the world. And I think there should be much more recognition of that kind of thing. The David Strelic transfer was very disappointing as well. Not everybody was massively keen on David Strelic coming to the club. I think he actually would have been a player who would have scored goals for us in Scottish football, obviously, but also in European football. The fact that he went to Middlesbrough is very, very disappointing. But for those who were here early in the live stream, Scotland is 27th ranked league in the world. The English Championship, so one level below the English Premier League, is the 7th ranked league in the world. So English Championship is ranked way above a lot of the other big European leagues and big world leagues. So maybe not too surprising, given how much money there is in that English Championship, given the fact there are a lot of teams yo-yoing up and down between the Premier League and the Championship. Obviously, when you go to the Premier League, you get tons and tons of money. Then you get your parachute payment. So There are actually an awful lot of very, very rich league. Yes, it is really, really sad that Scotland are the 27th. The Scottish Premiership is the 27th ranked league in the world. The Scottish Championship's the one level down from that. The Scottish Championship is the 73rd ranked league in the world. So English Premier League, number one ranked in the world. English Championship, 7th in the world. We've got our second level. It's the 73rd strongest league in the world. It's depressing. Oops. No, I'm not massively sure that Celtic have terribly much of a PR department. I think their public relations is one of the worst things. One of the worst things. Our public relations department is one of the worst things at the club, I think, personally. Kazakhstan it was 3,500 miles to travel to Almaty in Kazakhstan. So that was a 7.5 hour charter flight. If you wanted to get from Glasgow to Almaty, it was something like a at least 14-hour trip on commercial airliners. It's the kind of one you would have to fly to Amsterdam or fly to Frankfurt and fly somewhere else and fly somewhere else to get to Almaty, which apparently is right on the border between Kazakhstan and China. So it's actually technically it's in Asia, rather the place is actually in Asia rather than in Europe, but Kazakhstan qualifies as being in Europe. So a 7,000-mile round trip and 7.5 hours for the players to fly there, and the flight for the fans flying on commercial airliners would have been pretty incredible. You make a very good point that there's one of these vicious circle type of things. The further Scotland goes down in terms of the coefficient, the harder it is for Scotland to get teams through the qualifying rounds. So obviously, all our teams got knocked out of the qualifying rounds that they were in. Obviously, Aberdeen dropped from Europa League to the Conference League. Celtic and Rangers dropped out the Champions League qualifying into Europa League. So we do actually have 3 teams who are going to be in the league stages of the events. But all the other teams, so all the Scottish teams lost in the qualifiers. Sorry. I don't on. Just a second. Let's see if we can do this. So just to answer, sorry, the question of where Kazakhstan are in terms of global rankings. Just be a wee minute or two. See if we can find the Kazakhstan league. Right. So now we're at the Scottish Championship is down at 73rd. So I didn't see the Kazakhstan League actually in the top 76 leagues in the world, which is kind of numbing as well. Yeah, so Scotland, our Scottish Premiership, Scottish Premier League is one better than the Cypriot League. Although, to be fair, they did get somebody through to the. They did get someone through to the. Sabres did get Paphos through the qualifiers. So, in essence, the Kazakhstan League is 114. Well, fair enough. So, yeah. So Kazakhstan as a country is way down. Their league in this global league ranking isn't in the top 76. So this global ranking team people have the Scottish Championship at 73rd, so they're ranking the Kazakhstan League is beneath that. One of the problems with the Kazakhstan League is it used to be part of the Russian league, and they had a couple of Kazakhstan teams were part of the Russian professional league, but obviously when all that fell apart with the breakup of the Soviet Union, the Kazakhstan League lost an awful lot of its money, a lot of its prestige, and fell down in the world. Yeah, so no, certainly no. The Kairat Almaty were something like 300th in terms of the ranking in the as a club coefficient. So they were right down, which is why they started in the first possible round of the qualifying. One of the factors, I think, that also goes against Celtic and goes against the Scottish clubs in Europe is that all the Champions League, Conference League, Europa League qualifiers, early rounds are all in like July, and which means basically that our players are playing right to the very end of May with the cup final and all the league matches right up to the end of May. They get 1 month off and then they're back into pre-season training, and within a week or two of being back into pre-season training, they're into very, very important qualifiers, and very often against teams who are halfway, 2/3 through their league system. The Kairat Almaty were top of the league, just ahead of Astana, and they're about 2/3, 3/4 of their way through the league season, just the way that they have their from what month to what month they play their league. So Kairat Almaty were 100% match ready, 100% match ready. Celtic's players were just at the start of their proper season. They'd come through pre-season. We were 3 or 4 league games and one League Cup match into our season. So we were still very early in our season, but we've possibly had, as it turns out, our two most important games of this season occurred when we were still maybe about half-baked or certainly quite a long way away from being ready. I think the Kazakhstan, Kairat Almaty, I think actually, to be fair, I think Kairat Almaty were a very good team doing what they did. And I think they adapted the way they normally play in Kazakhstan football to get themselves through all the various different qualifiers, because in the previous round, of course, they beat Slovan Bratislava, a team much more, a lot more money for Slovan Bratislava, a much more successful club, a bigger league in the Czech league, and they knocked them out as well, playing much the same way that they did against Slovan Bratislava as they did against Celtic. And again, we hadn't done anything to counteract the way that Kirat Almaty were playing to have got themselves through 3 rounds of qualifying before they played us. And that was one of the most disappointing things. Yep. Yes, Wales did get a 1-0 win across in Kazakhstan, and I think the last time Scotland went to play Kazakhstan in Kazakhstan, I think they lost 3-0. And one of the factors was that no Scottish team had ever won a match in Kazakhstan. So the full international team had never won a game in Kazakhstan. The under-21s had never won in Kazakhstan. No club team had ever won in Kazakhstan. The best anybody had done was Celtic had got some draws in Kazakhstan previously, but no Scottish team had ever actually gotten to Kazakhstan at any level, internationally or club level, and never actually got a win. So, although on the night we should have definitely got a win. The Kazakhstan team was an interesting mixture of various different international countries. There were a couple of Israeli players. They had a Russian, a Belarusian. They had Brazilians. They had some Portuguese. They did have a few Kazakhstan. Both their goalkeepers were Kazakhstanis. Their really talented teenager Satpayev, he's a Kazakhstan, but I fully accept about 2/3 of their side were non-Kazakhstanis. They had players from all over the place. The whole Kazakhstan team that beat us over 2 legs cost €350,000 to put together. They bought 2 players for this season, one for €250,000 and one for €100,000. All their other players that got on free transfers from various different leagues. A couple of the players they played against us had not been terribly successful at other clubs. I think it was their Portuguese striker had come from Luxembourg football or Liechtenstein football, and then he actually did a really good job up front, leading the line in the second leg. In the first leg, it was more of an attacking midfielder with Satpayev. But in terms of quality player, Satpayev, who's on his way to Chelsea next summer when he turns 18, is probably by far the best player in Kazakhstan football, and probably the best they've had for a long time. And of course, he wasn't playing for them in the second leg, which is even more frustrating. But certainly, Kazakhstan did have a couple of Brazilians on their side, Idmilson, and I can't remember what the other one's name was because Serginho, I can't remember what it was. They had two Brazilians on their side. Their manager, also slightly disappointingly, is their manager doesn't actually have all his actual official European coaching badges, and was getting to manage Kirat Almaty under special dispensation. He hasn't actually got all the proper pro licenses to manage at this level. It's going to be interesting. You make a very good point, Scott Dougal, to see how Kirat Almaty are going to do. I think possibly in their away games when they're playing in other countries, I think they could well be on for a hiding. They could be certainly potentially rivaling Rangers in terms of the worst ever Champions League record in terms of the group stages. I do think that a lot of teams are going to struggle going to play in Kazakhstan with the heat, the altitude, the travelling distances. Practically for all European teams, travelling to play in Kazakhstan in the Champions League is going to be quite a long trip. And I'm pretty sure one of the commentators was saying the last time that Kairat Almaty were in a European competition, they went unbeaten in their 3 home legs in the old-fashioned group stage of whatever tournament it was. So they went unbeaten. They drew their 3 home games, or won one of their home games, and lost and drew 2 other home games, including against pretty good teams like, I think it was one of the Portuguese teams, Benfica maybe, went there and drew. So it will be interesting to see how Kairat's team travels, and I would expect that if anybody is playing against Kairat Almaty in where Kairat Almaty are playing away from home, I'm sure that the manager of that club is going to research far better of how Kairat Almaty play, particularly when they're playing away from home. But I do think the teams are going to struggle going to play Kairat Almaty. Haven't actually properly looked to see who Kairat Almaty will be playing home and away in their 8 Champions League matches. But I wouldn't be too surprised if they don't take a point or 2 off of some of the teams when they do come to play in Kazakhstan. So I don't think it's an easy place to play in. As evidenced by the fact that we didn't play very well there, and no Scottish teams ever won a game over there. Yeah, I think we have gone backwards since the Munich match. To lay all the blame on the board, I think, is very unfair. It's the players, it's the manager, it's the coaching staff, it's the backroom staff, it's all the various different things. I think the board have got a certainly big thing, but I think Rodgers has got a lot of things to answer. A lot of the players have got a lot of things to answer for. The attitude of a player like Nicholas Kuhn, who reportedly, from what people are talking about in the background, his attitude in the second half of the season was quite poor when he had his possible transfer turned down in the January window. A lot of people were saying that his effort and his consistency and his training and stuff all did take a step down in the second half of the season. So I think it's an awful lot of things. And so obviously, if a player is a bit half-hearted in terms of the way of his effort and his training and stuff, it's down to the coaches, the manager, etc., to get the best out of them. And that didn't seem to be the case with Rodgers and Kuhn and many of the players in the second half of the season. Certainly something seemed to go wrong with Adam Idah. His attitude, his effort, his energy, far worse the couple of months that he was with us at this season compared to how he was, particularly in his loan spell. Yeah, I fully agree. Fully agree. Had Dyson might have put away that chance in added time in the first leg, had Dyson might have put away that chance in the 85th minute of the second leg, Celtic would be in the Champions League draw proper. I know it's maybe the wrong thing to think, but in essence, in some ways, had we qualified for the Champions League, would that have been papering over the cracks of what are clearly problems behind the scenes? To be fair to the financial people and the board, etc., we did spend £30 million last summer. We spent another £8 million in January of this year. We spent 15 million in terms of transfers in this transfer window, approximately. Plus, you think about the amount of money you would guess that people like Jota and Kieran Tierney are on for them to come back to Celtic from the astronomical amounts of money they were getting in Saudi football, English football, French football. So I'm pretty sure the contracts that Jota and Kieran Tierney are on are a very, very large financial commitment by the club. So that's money that the board has paid and is paying out, and both those two have got good long-term contracts. And so that's a big financial outlay to bring those two players back to the club. And quite a lot of people are saying that the contract that Carter Vickers and Callum McGregor have got guarantees that they'll be in the top 3 paid players at the club. So bringing Jota and Tierney back on higher wages means that you also have to step up Carter Vickers and McGregor's contract, supposedly. Yeah, no, so I'm pretty much fully agreeing with everybody that we've got plenty of money coming into the club. I think we've also made a big commitment in terms of upping players' contracts and salaries, which is quite an important thing that keeps players at the club. So it's kept Rio Hatate at the club, it's kept Callum McGregor at the club, kept Carter Vickers at the club, it kept Matt O'Reilly at the club for a bit longer. Alistair Johnston was given a big upgrade. I think that keeps him at the club in the longer term. So I think there has been quite a large commitment in terms of Celtic's wage budget to reward our best players and keep our best players at the club, which I think is a big financial commitment. But and we did spend we spent a lot of money in last summer's transfer window, and the returns of that have not been as good as we would have hoped, in that Engels isn't a first team choice, Trussie's not a first team choice, McCown's not a first team choice, Paulo Bernardo's not a first team choice, and Adam Idah we bought for 9 million and we sold him for 6 million. So that was not very good transfer work to buy a player for 9 million, equal your highest ever transfer fee at that point, and then 12 months later you sell him for a 2 to 3 million pound loss, depending on how Idah does at Swansea. His transfer fee will go up to 7 million if he does well at Swansea. You make a good point, Paul McEwen. It's difficult to know whether Hatate is still at Celtic because other teams pulled out of. Now, they're reportedly, and again, with all the stories that we get, because of the lack of transparency, the lack of a club spokesman to keep us up to date with these things, what we rely on is supposed inside sources telling Anthony Joseph certain things, or Fabrizio Romano certain things, or the journalists at the Record, or the journalists at the Herald, or the Scotsman, or everything, the Stephen McGowans. We rely on them being told things, or them saying they've been told things, as to know whether there was a lot of interest in Hatate. I've got a strong feeling that Hatate would have left the club this summer, was it not for the fact that he got injured right at the end of the 24-25 season. And he wasn't actually back to full fitness until deep in the pre-season. He sort of was getting back to when he was across in Japan. He had done a wee bit of personal training on the grass and football skills with schools and universities and stuff over there. So he was just coming back to being fit to start training right at the very start of our pre-season, when he and Dyson Maida were given a couple of weeks extra of pre-season holidays before they came back to the club. But Idah really wasn't apparently fit until right at the start of the start of pre-season. So I think possibly if he'd been properly fully fit, that he probably would have been away from the club over the summer transfer windows. Do I think the Kieran Tierney signing will work out? Up until just before I came on to do this live stream, I would have said yes. I thought he was making good progress. I think his performances have been generally good. His performance against Rangers wasn't terribly good at the weekend, but apparently both he and Ralston have pulled out of the Scotland squad for the two internationals in this break because of injury. I think Ralston clearly got an ankle injury late in the Kiryat Almaty second leg. He was able to play the full 90 minutes against Rangers at the weekend. He didn't appear to be sort of carrying an injury, but he went to Scotland squad and he's been pulled out of those two games. For Ralston, it looks much more precautionary. Kieran Tierney went to the Scotland squad. There's different stories as to quite what's happened, but it may be that he's suffered a bit of a bruising or something. They talked about a contact injury, which would suggest that it's not one of his previous hamstring leg injuries that he became very prone to. So to answer your question, Clashman Numpty, I do think Kieran Tierney is going to turn out well. It does appear that he's had a bit of a blip in that the suggestion is this new injury, whatever it is going to cause him to be out for maybe a week or two, possibly longer. There's talk about him having had some kind of scan on Scotland duty. They didn't say what the scan was of or what it showed. So I do think Kieran Tierney is going to turn into success coming back to Celtic. I think he's very much is a player who possibly should never have left Celtic. He had a good start to his career when he went to Arsenal. Then it all kind of fell apart. He then kind of fell out of favour at Arsenal. Then a lot of injury problems at Arsenal. Didn't have a terribly successful loan season across in Spain. Came back to Arsenal, was like third, fourth choice left back. Did have some game time last season after recovering from the leg injury he had on European nations duty. It was also quite frustrating regarding Odsonne Edouard, in that he actually went for a pretty low transfer fee as well. So Strelic went for about £6 million. Odsonne Edouard, I think, ended up going for about £4 million. So don't know what people would have felt about Odsonne Edouard coming back to the club. He scored certainly plenty of goals for Celtic. Prior to going down to Crystal Palace, wasn't terribly successful for Crystal Palace or for Leicester on loan, but I think he probably would have come back to Celtic and scored a ton of goals for Celtic. If whoever bought him in this summer got him for $4 million, I'm sure Celtic could have got him for $4 million as well. That's assuming that he would have come back. Not massively convinced that Stuart Armstrong's going to do terribly much for Aberdeen. But we'll see. It's going to be quite interesting, I think, to see how players who are coming back to Scottish football do, how Bojan Miovski does coming back to Scottish football, how Kieran Tierney is going to do coming back to Scottish football, Stuart Armstrong, Kevin Nisbet, another player back at Aberdeen, how they're all going to do coming back to, because none of them were terribly successful having left Scottish football. Yeah, I don't know. I think signing Luke McCowan last season from Dundee is probably one of the deals that worked the best from last summer's transfer window. I think Luke McCowan was signed to be a squad player, a bench player, an intermittent starter to rest the other players, a player to come off the bench and create goals and score goals. And I think Luke McCowan's probably, of all the ones we bought last summer, he's probably the one that's actually done what he was bought for. We got him for $1 million. I think we've probably got our worth out of Luke McCowan last season. He played a lot of games coming off the bench, quite a number of starts, scored goals for us, created goals. He scored the goal, obviously, against St Mirren that won us the first game of the season. He's probably contributed more to Celtic than Trusty and Engels, certainly a lot more than Paulo Bernardo. Quite why Paulo Bernardo was brought back by Rodgers, because Rodgers has not really used him terribly much, and certainly hasn't really given him a proper starring role at any point. Some theories that either Engels or Paulo Bernardo were being groomed to be the new Callum McGregor. Neither of the two of them seems to have been given much of a run out at the Callum McGregor number 6 role. Both of them theoretically had played that role before in other levels of football. Yeah, we were talking about that a wee bit earlier on, about Scott Brown being a possibility for to be Celtic manager. I think he would be a good Celtic manager. I'm just not convinced that he'd be a good Celtic manager yet. I think he needs to probably have another club at a higher level, then come back to Celtic. He wasn't terribly successful in his first managerial job, got sacked quite quickly. Has done a good job at Ayr, didn't get them up last season, championship. Although let's say that the Scottish Championship last season was quite a strong one, with Livingston and Falkirk and Raith Rovers and Partick Thistle, as well as Ayr. So probably wasn't the easiest thing to come out of that league last season. Could be a bit difficult as well, obviously, coming out this season with Ross County and St Johnstone having gone down there. Nisbet certainly was somebody that a while ago that was linked with Celtic. He ended up not coming to Celtic, went down to Millwall, not really a big success at Millwall. Aberdeen, bit of a okay on his loan spell, and he's now back there permanently. I think, Lorden, that Sean Maloney is probably in a very good role now as being the sort of development manager. He certainly was a really good assistant manager for Roberto Martinez at Belgian level. He's had 2 or 3 goes at being a manager by himself, and he's been a major failure. I don't see him as being having any possibility of being Celtic manager any time. I think his role as the development manager, liaising between first team and loans and the academy and the B team, is probably his best role. Yeah, I think Scott Brown would be a successful manager at Celtic. I do agree, Pope Trop Express. I think he's got to get more experience and manage at a higher level before he comes to manage Celtic. To be fair, Neil Lennon did a good job, having been an assistant manager for a wee while, and then he came in to manage Celtic. His number of trophies and stuff were good at Celtic, whether that's partly due to the time that he managed Celtic, Certainly first time around, it wasn't the hardest league and cups and stuff to win. But he did keep up the success going for a few years. Then had obviously his last season at Celtic was a complete and utter travesty for one reason or another. So I do see Scott Brown becoming a Celtic manager in time. Another person who theoretically could become a Celtic manager in time would be Callum McGregor. You do wonder whether maybe if Scott Brown did come to become Celtic manager, he might get Callum McGregor as his assistant manager. They might actually turn into a very good team. I have got this sneaky feeling about Robbie Keane as being a future Celtic manager. I think a lot of us would like Ange Postecoglou back, but someone was saying on a previous live stream that Ange Postecoglou said he never goes back in life, he always keeps on going forward. So I don't see Ange Postecoglou coming back to Celtic. I think Brendan Rodgers is the kind of manager who would come back to Celtic. He was at a loss. He wasn't getting any. He got sacked, obviously, by Leicester. Nobody had come in for him, despite there being a few more jobs in England and around Europe becoming available, and no one had come in for him. And then Ange left, and Rodgers was at a loss, and then he came into us. So. You make a very good point, Lauren. I think as a club, in theory, Celtic are an attractive club to come to. I do think at the moment there is a disconnect between Rodgers and the financial people, the scouting people, the recruitment people. And that may well be because last summer's transfer spending hasn't turned into good first team players on a good percentage, nor did the 23-24 summer transfer window. A lot of the players that were signed in the summer of 2023 have not turned into first team players or quality players. So we've basically had a series of transfer windows since Brendan Rodgers came back, and none of them really has delivered much in the way of quality players. We spent, 3 and a bit million on Lagerbielke, 4 and a bit million on Nawrocki, 3 and a bit million on Lewis Palmer. None of them are at the club anymore. We spent 1.5 million on Tilio. He's gone. There's an awful lot of players who got signed under Brendan Rodgers in his first, second, and now third season, and they're not turning into first team players, and quite a number of them are already away, having been sold or loaned out. Like Nawrocki's been loaned out, Lagerbielke's been sold, Lewis Palmer's been loaned with a view to a transfer. Kwon's gone and been a big success so far briefly in France. O's gone. O was bought by Ange Postecoglou, but then sold by Rodgers. He's been a big success in Belgian football. Oops. So I have said, and it maybe I'm too glass half full, maybe I am too filled with all the joys of the last 15 years or so of being a Celtic fan, or even the last 25 years since Martin O'Neill came to the club in 2000, or you can even take that back a wee bit to years before that. Celtic's been, since Martin O'Neill's time certainly, has been the number one team in Scotland pretty much most seasons for 25 years, and certainly the last 15 years that Celtic's been the number one team. We've had doubles and trebles non-stop for the last 15 years. We've had one season, we had a 9 in a row. Then we lost, obviously, and then we've won another whole string of titles two under Ange and then two under Rodgers. I think, to answer Typhoon McFlustery's question, I do think if Celtic can get their players playing, so Rodgers and the coaching staff and the players themselves can get themselves playing back at their best or near their best, I think they are the best team in Scotland. I think our squad is the best in Scotland. I think our backup players are better than the backup players at other clubs. If other clubs have a lot of luck with no injuries, their first team choices against our backups could be an issue. I think the loss of Alistair Johnston has been pretty massive in a lot of different ways. I think it proves how important he is to Celtic as a player and as a leader and an inspiration. That we're missing him, and we're missing him in a lot of different ways. Players who should really be having been stepping up to allow the new players to come in and have a bedding down period. The McGregors, the Carter Vickers, the Ralstons, the Engels, the Hatatis, the Maidahs, the Forrest, etc. They have not stepped up this season to bridge the gap to allow the new transfers to come in and have an easier start. So to answer, I have kind of waffled on. I think Celtic, if they keep their team, if they improve their team and get them back on the right page and the right mentality, I think Celtic will do the double or the treble this season. If Celtic get their players playing at their best, I think they have got every opportunity and chance to get through to the knockout stage of the Europa League. But that really is dependent on the players and the coaching staff and the managerial staff doing their job and getting themselves all back on the right page. Because at the moment they're on the wrong page. They're slow in their tactics. They're slow. They're negative in their tactics, and that's not the Celtic way. And it's not the way that things were for much of last season. It's been the way that certainly Celtic's been off and on ever since the Bayern Munich match for one reason or another. So I think generally over the course of a season, the best team in the league with the best players and the best backups is the team that's best capable of coping with injuries, suspensions, coping with the very busy spell over Christmas and New Year. Another side effect of the transfer window that we've had is that we have two players for definite who are very, very likely to be going off to the African Cup of Nations in sort of December, January time, because Chinyeke and Iheanacho are still current internationals for Tunisia and for Nigeria. Mikel-Ange Balakwisha is Belgian and has played for Belgium at all kinds of level, but he reportedly has told the country his parents are from that he's happy to play for them. So I think that's the Democratic Republic of Congo, and so he theoretically could end up going off to the African Cup of Nations. Rangers, to be fair, also have 2 or 3 players who also will be off to the African Cup of Nations as well around the same time. I haven't researched how any of the other teams are, how many of them are going to be. So my personal feeling is that Benjamin Negrin has proven already that he is able to score goals playing in this sort of central midfield, attacking midfielder role. He scored a good number of goals previously when he was playing in Swedish and Danish football, from central striker roles and from wide roles. So Benjamin Negreen, looking at his career, 205 games, 63 goals, pretty decent. Dyson Maida, 352 games, won 16 goals, pretty decent. Yang's record, not so decent. So I think, honestly, that Idah will score goals for us this season. Johnny Kenny will score goals for this season. Shin Yamada in a few weeks' time, assuming he gets a proper chance coming off the bench or maybe even making some starts. I think he's going to score goal if Yamada can score a good number of goals in the J League in the 2024 season. He can certainly score them in the Scottish League. In terms of the global rankings, the J League is a few above Scotland in terms of global rankings, in terms of quality of the teams, quality of the players, quality of the matches and stuff. So I think Yamada is going to score goals for us. One of the successes of last season, of course, was we got a lot of goals from Kuhn and Maida. Kuhn certainly always playing in a wide role. Maida scored a lot of goals from a wide role. Jota scored some goals. Hopefully Jota's back playing for us January onwards. One of the things that does worry me is we've not really heard any kind of update as to how Jota's doing in terms of his rehab and his fitness and stuff. Yeah. I think Johnny Kenny could be a surprise success this season. He showed flashes of good form and good skills last season. His goal against Livingston was a very good goal, an excellent run to meet that cross from Idah to score. So I think Kenny again could be a player that's going to score goals for us. So I think in terms of Scottish football, we've got Iheanacho, we've got Yamada, we've got Kenny. They're all going to score goals at this level. Idah, Balikwisha can score goals. Tanyetki can score goals. Negreen's proven from the role that he's playing, which may not be his best role, he can score goals from midfield. One against Aberdeen, two against Livingston. I think we actually do have a number of potentially talented young players in the academy. Turley showed some good form in pre-season matches. McCardle came in at the end of last season. I thought he looked a pretty decent player. Colby Donovan, I think, is probably the best of our academy players. I did wonder with the squad, with the Europa League squad, whether having Alistair Johnston in it, because he's not going to be back probably fit until November. Admittedly, there are still going to be a few games. We're going to be at least halfway through the Europa League season before Johnston can come back at the earliest. That's assuming that he keeps on improving. I think this season, Pope Leo the 14th, that probably this season is one season too early for Osmond, which is why, as I was saying an hour and a half ago at the start of the live stream, that's why I was really, really surprised that he didn't get sent off to some other Scottish club or English club on loan for the season to get him first team football, to help him bridge the gap between really promising career at Fulham at under 18, under 21 level. I think Osmond is a player with tons and tons of potential. Scored a lot of goals in the English under 21 Premier League competition, which is a strong I wasn't aware that Turley was injured. I thought he did have some games in the pre-season, but I could be wrong. As I was saying, I do think there's more. Certainly, Alistair Johnston is going to miss at least probably half of the games, in that he's not going to be back until November at the earliest. If his recovery is slower, that could be easily into December or January. So I did wonder about having Alistair Johnston in the squad. If things go really well for Alistair Johnston, he would be back for the second half of the Europa Leagues, which could well be important. And I think he is a player that we're missing a lot at the moment on and off the pitch. I did think about it. I did think that exactly the same thing myself when the squad came up. I think Callum Osman will be a good player for Celtic next season. I think this is one season too early for him, and I'm really surprised he's not been sent anywhere off on loan, because with Iheanacho in the club, Kenny in the club, Yamada in the club, with, I would guess, Dyson Maida being the number 2 central player behind Iheanacho, you would guess that in a few weeks' time, Iheanacho will take over as being the number 1 striker at Celtic. He very much fits into the Rodgers way of playing. He by far, Iheanacho's most successful period of his career was under Brendan Rodgers at Leicester. Scored a lot of goals for Rodgers at a high level in those times. He is a good player for coming back to get the ball, spread the ball out wide, which is what Rodgers tried unsuccessfully to do with Kyogo 2 seasons ago in Rodgers' first season. Kept on getting Kyogo to come back deep to sort of get the ball, then spread it out to the wings. It's not the way that Kyogo plays. It's not really the way that Adam Idah plays either. Idah did try playing that role, but yes. So if Celtic did get through the Europa League stage into the knockout stage, you do get to add people and take away people and stuff. So during the actual 8 games of the Europa League, the only changes to your squad you can make in the Europa League 8 games is going to be all of the academy players. Any player that's been at Celtic for 2 years and was born after 2003. So all the players who were born in 2004 up to later years, and then I've been at Celtic for 2 years, all of them can come into the squad. So the Donovans, the Turleys, the McArdles, etc., they can all be brought into the squad. So we can freshen up the squad in terms of our young academy players, but in terms of the experienced first team squad, we're stuck with the players that Rodgers chose a couple of days ago. But certainly, if we do get to the knockout stages, which I think they've got the potential to do, yes, we can add players in, take players out, because hopefully by then Jota's going to be back fit for the knockout stage of the Europa League, assuming that we get there. Thank you. It's always wonderful to get some positive feedback, especially when things at the moment are not terribly positive in and around Celtic. So thank you very much. It's always really nice to get positive comments, be it on a live stream, be it after the video, or in comment sections. It's really nice to get positive feedback. Well, to be fair to Kelechi Iheanacho, he is 28 years old, which is still a relatively young man. After Kyogo was gone 30 towards the end of his Celtic career. So Kelechi Iheanacho, 28 years old, so that still is a perfectly good age for a striker. if he recovers the form he had in his first couple of years at Man City, and then particularly his years at Leicester, he's going to. I think he could be a really good player for Celtic. The interesting thing was often when he was at Leicester, he played up alongside Jamie Vardy, upside Vardy, and the two of them often Iheanacho set up Vardy for Vardy's goals. So although it's never really been the way at Celtic to have two strikers up front for a long time, it worked brilliantly in the Martin O'Neill years with Sutton, Hartson and Larsson as a bigger striker and a smaller striker. It's a long time since we've played two up front on a consistent basis. Rodgers did it a wee bit, Postecoglou did it a wee bit, but we've never really consistently played two up front. Thank you. Thank you, Pope Leo the 14th. Great to have such a highly esteemed, famous viewer to the live stream. So yeah, I've been supporting Celtic for 53 years, since 1972, the days of Dixie Deans and Harry Hood, and the ends of the Lisbon Lions like Bobby Lennox, Billy McNeill, Jimmy Johnston, or the start of the great Quality Street kids like Kenny Dalglish, Lou Macari, Davy Hay, George Connolly. It was a great time to support Celtic back in the early 70s. The end of the Lisbon Lions, the start of the new Jock Stein team. Some of Celtic's greatest ever players were playing for Celtic when I was first a supporter. The Danny McGrains, the Ken Dalglishs. So it's been a great 53 years. Hopefully I've got quite a number of years still to support Celtic. And I think Celtic are going to carry on being the best team in Scotland for a long time. A lot of people, I can't remember what it was, but they were making a big thing about the fact that the San Francisco 49ers, financial people who of course own Rangers, are such a massive financial club, and that their profits, their finances were $6.7 billion or something, and they were number 6 in America in terms of sporting clubs. Well, the amount of money in American football is astronomical, way bigger actually than the English Premier League. And none of that money that San Francisco 49ers have got for their San Francisco 49ers in the National Football League is going to come anywhere near Rangers or anywhere near Leeds. So I don't think the financial clout of the San Francisco 49ers has got the least thing to do with making Rangers any better. Very clearly, the new management structure at Rangers is very based on what Celtic doing, buying younger players, loan players, developing them, and then moving them on, and selling off your players for profits. So Rangers actually got rid of a lot of players in their transfer window, and brought in a lot of players, but a lot of their players that they have brought in are relatively inexperienced and relatively unproven. We were talking about Yusuf Chermiti. They bought him for £8 million, rising to £10 million, and yet he scored 0 goals for Everton in 24 games. He's only scored 3 or 4 goals at first team professional level in his whole life, and yet they've spent £8 million on him. And I would be personally surprised if Chermiti is a success in Scottish football. Same way that Fabio Silva was a complete failure in Scottish football as well, who had a similar kind of record in Portuguese football and in playing for Wolves and a variety of other clubs. To thank you as a really nice comment, Lauren. I honestly do not believe in moaning and groaning, and I don't believe in complaining about things. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I'm perfectly happy to admit that there might be something wrong with me, one of my thoughts is the fact that I supported Celtic through the 80s and 90s when things were pretty awful most seasons. As I said, being so far behind Rangers in those years, but then also being behind Aberdeen and Dundee United in those years for much of the time. But also at the same time, the club was being run into financial rack and ruin, close to bankruptcy. So the 80s and the 90s were not good years to be a Celtic supporter in terms of the way the club was going, but also with the way that the success. So maybe I am too forgiving, too optimistic, too hopeful, too positive about things. But I don't believe in moaning and groaning about things. And I especially don't believe in moaning and groaning about things that I can't change. And I honestly don't think there is any way that we as fans can change. The comments about sack the board, I think it's a nice sentiment, but I don't think it's achievable in a million years unless a whole lot of millionaire Celtic fans club together to buy enough shares to get themselves onto the board and then act as spokespeople for the real fans. My personal feeling is people like Dermot Desmond are perfectly genuine Celtic fans. I think they do know the club, they know the history, they know the history going back to all those 130, 140 years of the club. I think that's one of the risks of, as I said, I think on a previous live stream, is one of the risks of bringing in American billionaires, Saudi billionaires, Russian oil oligarchs like Abramovich, is the whole ethos of the club disappears, which I don't think is a good thing. I think Celtic are lucky that we've got a brilliant club with a tremendous history, a global reach, fans all over the world because of the nature of Scottish people and Irish people being people that are happy to explore and go off to new worlds. So we've got fans all over the world. We're a tremendous, brilliant club. And I think it's a club that within the confines of being Scottish can go a long, long way. I'm personally happy for Scotland, for Celtic to be the best team in Scotland. I'm personally happy for Celtic to win the league pretty much every year and win doubles and trebles like we are for the last 15 years. So I'm happy with the way things are. I don't think we can change the board. I don't think there's any way of pressurising the board. I think things like boycotting the Europa League matches, boycotting cup matches is counterproductive. I don't think it's going to help the players win games if there's a silence in the crowd rather than a resounding cheers and resounding "you'll never walk alones," etc. I think the important thing is to support the players, not buying merchandising, etc. I think that would have an impact on more on the club, less so on the board. Quite a lot of the merchandising is all part of sponsorship agreements with sponsors, agreements with the shirt manufacturers. Although to be fair, no one's obliged to buy the brand new Celtic strip. We can. Most of my Celtic strips are strips I've had for a long, long time. I haven't bought a new Celtic strip, although hopefully this is not designed hopefully to let me for anybody to boycott the channel. I haven't bought any new Celtic strips for a long, long time. Bought some merchandising like this T-shirt and sweatshirts and stuff, but I haven't bought a new strip because the price of a Celtic shirt just seems so absolutely astronomical that I couldn't countenance buying a new one every year. But plenty of people do, and that's a tremendous support for the club. That money does go back into the structure of the club. It goes back into player wages. It goes back into all the support staff, all the other people that Celtic support. It goes back into the Celtic Foundation. Celtic Foundation, important for charity. Celtic Foundation is is where the women's team gets the majority of their money from. Is from the foundation. Very little of the money actually that goes into the women's team comes from the main Celtic team, and part of the reason that they had a bad season last season not wishing to get sidetracked, is again a lack of anybody managing things behind the scenes, and things fell apart for the women's team last year in what should have been, with them getting to the Champions League, a big season for them. They kind of, like the men's team, regressed last season rather than keeping on going forwards. Yes, so if the Celtic Trust, so if, let's say, for the sake of example of a person, Rod Stewart, with all his tens of millions of pounds, decided he would put money into the Celtic Trust, I think certainly with his money buying shares, etc., then the Celtic Trust would have the ability to have some form of power in the board. But also, Lauren's making a brilliant point that Celtic actually have an awful lot of very strong financial companies who are invested in the club through shares, etc. So it's an extremely complex thing, and as fans, I don't think we can really get in the way that modern day football clubs are set up. I don't think there's any real great way that Celtic fans or any fans can take control of the club. The only real way for fans to take control of a club is for the club to go completely and utterly bankrupt. And I don't think any of us would ever want Celtic to go completely and utterly bankrupt. But there are a few teams who have been reborn that way. Wimbledon being an example of a team that got sold off to Milton Keynes, and then the supporters then recreated the club. A few other clubs are like that as well, where the fans have kind of bought the club over and made it a success. I don't think that's ever going to happen at Celtic. Yeah. So Lauren making a really good point for those who do follow the women's team. I follow the women's team as well. It's been a great thing for me and my daughter to share watching the women's team. They got a big game against Rangers, and they had, in last season they should have taken the team forward. The team went backward and backward and backward. It seems to be going forward again now. So hopefully things will. Yes. So Alina Sadiku's record in terms of Celtic Rangers matches is 1 win, 4 draws, 5 defeats out of 10. So hopefully Sunday will change. And also, it's a shame that there's not VAR in women's football, because it would have helped in several Celtic Rangers matches. The women's club. Oh, let's get back to the men's team. So I'm very hopeful. I'm very positive about Celtic. I think we can change the things we can change, and I think the one thing that fans can do and should do is support the club in every way that they can, support the players 100%. I've been quite disappointed in the number of on Celtic fan sites and Scottish football sites of people saying, on the basis of 45 minutes of Mickel-Ange Balaquisha playing against Rangers, having come into he signed for Celtic 8 o'clock, I think, on Thursday evening. He would have had training with the squad on Saturday and Friday and Saturday, as well as all these PR type things and interviews over that period. He came into the playing against Rangers. He played 45 minutes. He didn't have a very good game at all, but so many people are saying that he's rubbish and he's not going to do any good. And people, even before Sebastian Tierney, he's kicked the ball for Celtic, people are saying that he's rubbish. People are saying that Ian Nacho is rubbish. They've not even played a second of football for Celtic, and we're already saying that they're no good. And I think those players are all good. I think Balaquisha, Taneki, Iheanacho, Yamada, Kenny are all going to be super duper players for Celtic. Thank you for yet more praise. And Pope Leo the 14th, in Celtic I trust. Yep. I trust in Celtic. I trust in the greater Celtic as well as all the people at Celtic. And I think Celtic is a great club, and I think Celtic's very, very strong financially. I think that Celtic should have been moving further and further forward, and we're certainly at the very best. We're stagnant. We're stale. I think in some ways we've actually gone back a bit. I don't think we've gone back as much as some people are saying. I think an awful lot of the squad that took us to the Bayern Munich two-legged game are still at Celtic. Some have moved on. If Tierney works out well, Nygren works out well, the other new transfers work out well, I think we have got a squad to take forward. And for me, the big problem has been the pre-existing players haven't stepped up in this transition phase to help the new players move in. And also, we didn't get our players in early enough. Had we used the old Ange Postecoglou way of getting players in generally early, I think a lot of the new players would already be bedded in. And what really frustrated me about particularly the Balikwisha and the Chinyeki deal was the price we got those two in the last few days of the transfer window was in essence exactly the same as the price we could have paid for them 4 weeks, 6 weeks earlier. And that to me is a massive disappointment. Quite whose fault that is, I don't know. But it was so frustrating. We could have bought Balikwisha for 4.5 to 5 million right at the start of the transfer window. That's what Royal Antwerp wanted. All the indications were that Balikwisha wanted to come to Celtic, and we could have had him in 2 months earlier. Chinyeki we could have had in about 4 to 6 weeks earlier, because that's the price that Hammarby had always wanted. And we did send scouts across to see Hammarby, be it for the left back or be it for Chinyeki. I think it was a central defender. We also were looking at Hammarby as well. We certainly looked like we were. We could have got both those two players in 4, 6, 8 weeks earlier, and I think that could have made a big difference start of the season, and particularly to the two kind of Almaty games. Yes, I think a brilliant point by Anton Rogan's left foot. Anton Rogan, again, from quite a number of years ago, but another really great Celtic player. Celtic very much at his heart, a great servant to Celtic, a bit like an Anthony Ralston, who's been here happily being the backup, happily being a squad player for year after year. Anton Rogan was another player, really strong, committed player, gave his all for Celtic. So we have been going for 3 hours and 13 minutes. It's been a lot of talking from me and some absolutely wonderful wonderful comments and input from all yourselves. You've also had a nice chat amongst yourselves. It's when I started doing these live streams a few weeks ago, I was concerned that that nobody would listen, nobody would watch, nobody would participate. I have been massively honoured and massively pleased at how much people have participated, the fact that it has all been really good-spirited and all really friendly, because as I think someone was saying about some other live streams that I've watched and commented on, sometimes the tone can get quite nasty. A lot of the comment sections gets quite sort of judgmental and not nice. I have been. It's been wonderful how many people have participated. It's been wonderful how many people have watched. It's been wonderful how good the comments and how perceptive the comments have been, and also there's been, for the great majority, quite a positive note to the things as well. And I think the best thing with Celtic is to keep on being positive, keep on pushing forward, and we will get there in the end. Yeah, well, I'm sure you are. Sure you are a very, very busy man. So I think, as Pope Leo the 14th is suggesting, I think we'll call it an evening. It's actually officially now Friday, not Thursday, so probably a good time to finish. So thank you to everybody who has participated. Thank you for everybody who's commenting. I am planning to do another live stream next Thursday. It would be brilliant if some or all of you can attend next Thursday as well. It'd be great if you can bring some other friends as well. I am so happy with all the positive feedback you're giving me as a presenter, a podcaster, a leader of the chat, and so we'll call it a day there. Thank you so much for your participation. Hopefully see some or all of you next week, and we'll finish off by saying goodbye and hail, and night to everybody.